Chapter 86. The seal in Mu Ling's hand quietly disappeared. His entire person seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. His spirit suddenly changed and the blood in his body seemed to have become excited. The crowd outside the arena had also heard Xiao Yan's words. Instantly, the cold and gloomy faces of the people who were suppressed by Xiao Yan's aura immediately became intense. They were completely different from before. Complete pill! The complete pill has actually appeared. I heard that having this complete pill is equivalent to having an extra life. Damn it, let's see who dares to snatch it from me. The temptation of the complete pill had actually caused some people to go crazy. Their eyes were red as they stared at the medicine cauldron in front of Mu Ling. The robes on the surface of their bodies trembled unnaturally, and they assumed a posture as if they were ready to make a move at any time. At this moment, these people who lived on the edge of a knife all day finally could not resist the temptation of this complete pill. In their hearts, they had forgotten about the strength of their opponents and only had a desire for the treasure. Seeing this, Su Zhan's expression became gloomy the moment the words of the people around Xiao Yan sounded. His eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Xiao Yan. 5 breaths passed in the blink of an eye. The seal between Mu Ling's hands changed and the lid of the medicine cauldron exploded following his hand seal. The green flame turned into a thick fire dragon that circled in the air and roared at the sky. It was as if a real dragon had appeared. The fire dragon held a green pill that was the size of a longan in its mouth. Following which, the fire dragon twisted its body and charged into the sky. The body of the pill emitted a green light in all directions. Together with the powerful aura of the fire dragon, it dazzled the world. At this moment, the group of crazy Do Wangs and Do Huangs also looked at the complete pill in the sky with eyes full of desire. Immediately, the Do Chi wings on their backs flapped and appeared. Then, their bodies moved and they rushed toward the fire dragon. Looking from afar, it was as if countless streams of light were flying into the sky. Seeing this, Mu Ling's pupils shrank and he was pleasantly surprised. Although he was pleasantly surprised that he could refine a complete pill, he also knew how difficult it was to refine a complete pill. So, how was the medicinal strength of the complete pill? As an alchemist, he was naturally extremely clear about it. Hence, he already had other plans in his heart on how to use this China root pill. However, at this moment, when he saw this group of people actually shamelessly swarming forward, he was naturally extremely anxious in his heart. He was very aggrieved and thought to himself, the medicinal pills I refined are instead going to become someone else's wedding dress. What a shitty world. Humph. Suddenly, a soft snort was emitted from an unknown place. The group of Do Wangs and Do Huangs, who had flown forward, were all forcefully sent flying by an invisible strength under this sound. Seeing this scene, Mu Ling subconsciously turned his gaze toward Xiao Yan. He was not familiar with Xiao Yan, a stranger. Yet, this person had actually helped him. Why did he do so? Thinking about it in his heart, Mu Ling immediately seemed to have thought of something. The gratitude in his eyes when he looked at Xiao Yan also disappeared. All that was left was vigilance and fear. Although Xiao Yan only had the appearance of a young man, he had lived in the Do Chi continent for an unknown number of years and had seen many different kinds of people. With his shrewdness, he naturally understood Mu Ling's thoughts. After which, he laughed softly and said a sentence. You don't have to think so much. Your green flame Shen flame and complete pill can barely be considered as second-rate goods to me. You can rest assured. Hearing these words, Mu Ling's eyebrows twitched. He was about to vomit blood. Wasn't this person too arrogant? This was the first time he had seen someone look down on his green flame Shen flame, and even said that it could barely be considered as second-rate goods. He really wanted to say, you're the best, you're the best. Hurry up and leave. However, as long as this person didn't have any intention of spying on him, he wouldn't say anything. After all, a friend came from afar. Shouldn't he treat him with respect? Otherwise, what difference would there be between him and those thick-skinned people in the sky? Brother, thank you very much. I'm a little ashamed of what happened just now. Mu Ling's apology made Xiao Yan have a better impression of him. A person's character wasn't something that could be boasted about. A small matter was enough to show it. At this moment, Mu Ling had given Xiao Yan a real reason to help him. Compared to Mu Ling, Su Zhan's expression was even gloomier. Once the complete pill was revealed, it announced that his position as the #1 alchemist among the younger generation in Yanluo City had changed hands. Moreover, The owner of this title was the ant that he had casually stomped to death some time ago. Now that the roles had been switched, how could he endure it? The key point was that this brat had said something funny. This made him, as his opponent, lose face. Hence, Su Zhen's anger grew. The fire dragon circled the sky once. Following the change of Mu Ling's hand seal, it flew down in a spiral. The huge body of the fire dragon broke through the defensive tower and slowly disappeared. In the end, a China root pill landed in Mu Ling's palm. As he felt the warmth in his palm, Mu Ling could clearly sense the incomparably powerful medicinal strength and life force within the elixir. It was as if all the deathly aura would vanish in front of it. The life force of this elixir had actually reached such a terrifying level. Mu Ling raised his hand and opened his palm, exposing the China root pellet to the countless passionate gazes, causing a wave of resentment to shoot into the depths of his heart. However, at this moment, he was not afraid in his heart. A clear voice slowly came out from the former's mouth. This is a grade 7 complete pill, China root. Damn it, let's fight. Charge. Brother, come and fight with me for the pill. Before the clear voice faded, countless people had already charged towards the pill in Mu Ling's hand with crazed and ferocious expressions. From the looks of it, it was as though they wanted to devour Mu Ling as well. At this moment, Su Zhan's venomous voice suddenly resounded throughout the sky. His voice was faint. These words were uttered by Su Zhan after a huge struggle in his heart. At the same time, he pointed his finger at Xiao Yan. My Su family will repay whoever can help me kill these two people. Furthermore, this China root pill will also belong to that person. Once these words that were filled with temptation spread out, the originally already present crowd became even more important than their lives. Looking at Su Zhan's ruthless manner, this heavy reward was definitely not something the latter was perfunctory about. If they were fortunate enough to become a guest elder of the Su family, such a position would be second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people in a radius of a few thousand miles. Moreover, they would be able to enjoy countless resources. How could they give up so easily just because he said so? In their eyes, young Master Su's favor was even greater than the favor of a prince of the Celestial Empire. After all, this was a world where strength was respected. It was impossible for them not to be moved. Therefore, when Su Zhen's voice sounded, this group of Do Wangs and Do Huangs, numbering at least 100 people, had already crazily charged towards Xiao Yan and Mu Ling. Mu Ling's expression changed slightly. He was also extremely fearful of this terrifying crowd. Su Zhan also coldly smiled as he looked at the two of them from the side. In his heart he thought to himself, "You must be blind to provoke me. I am the young master of the Su family. Brat, so what if you're a Do Zong? Looks like your life will end today after provoking this young master. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being blind and standing on the wrong side." Compared to Su Zhan's vicious smile, Su Pei took a step forward and stood in front of Su Zhan. His eyes stared at Xiao Yan as an indescribable bad premonition arose in his heart. Xiao Yan's face was expressionless as he faced the crowd of lunatics. He did not like killing to begin with. Facing these people, he did not even have the heart to kill them. Perhaps this was the disdain of the strong towards the weak. Xiao Yan ignored the crazy crowd. Instead, he turned around and looked at Su Pei. Being stared at by Xiao Yan, the depths of Su Pei's heart suddenly shook. He quickly recovered, but the eyes with which he looked at Xiao Yan were filled with fear. "May I know who you are and where your teacher is from?" At this moment, even Su Pei, an elite Do Zun, had an additional solemn feeling when he spoke to Xiao Yan. Ignoring Su Pei, Xiao Yan flipped his hand and violently swung a slap. In the next instant, the countless number of Do Wangs and Do Huangs, who were hundreds of feet away from Xiao Yan and Su Pei, were sent flying backwards with a bang. The houses in this area were also smashed into ruins by this group of experts who were sent flying backwards. Originally, I did not want to do anything. However, a younger generation like you has the intention to kill me. This is something that I do not like. So, what do you want to do? Su Pei's eyes narrowed. He stared intently at Xiao Yan. The tone of his voice had clearly changed. He knew that it was likely that a big battle would be unavoidable today. Xiao Yan's indifferent eyes randomly glanced in a certain direction. Only then did he speak in a faint voice. "It is not that I want to do anything. Instead, it is all of you. Since you wish to deal with me, why do you need to say any more nonsense? Just come at me directly." Su Pei's expression suddenly turned cold when he heard this. He let out a cold snort and his body shook. Do Qi surged out of his body as his right hand was suddenly clenched. Immediately, he swung it once again, transforming his fist into a claw that grabbed at Xiao Yan. Brat, how arrogant. Receive this attack from the old me, Yama hand. Xiao Yan's body did not move even a little in the face of this attack. His body stood to the side and an invisible aura that could support the sky quietly spread out, causing a wave of cold wind to whistle in this area. At this moment, Su Pei's attack had finally arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Seeing Xiao Yan's calm face, Su Pei let out a cold snort in his heart. He coldly laughed at Xiao Yan's arrogance and ignorance. The Do Qi in his palm was even more agglomerated and its strength was even greater than before. However, in the next instant, Su Pei's body and the claw that was furiously grabbing at Xiao Yan stood horizontally in the air, unable to advance even an inch. There seemed to be an invisible barrier in front of Su Pei. Even he was powerless in front of this barrier. Ha! Explode for the old me. A thought passed through Su Pei's heart. He could not be bothered about his miserable appearance. The Do Qi within his body gathered on his palm. In an instant, it had already transformed into an enormous light cluster with a radius of 10 feet. The light cluster appeared crystal clear, appearing just like an ice crystal pearl. Numerous thunderbolts flickered with a dazzling lightning glow outside of the light cluster, giving it an extraordinary aura. Ha! Rolling thunder bead. Agglomerate. The enormous light cluster swiftly weakened and gathered in Su Pei's palm at a speed visible to the naked eye. The aura within it also became increasingly thick and fierce. It was likely that even a 7-star Do Zun would have difficulty enduring it if it were to erupt. Everyone outside of the arena could naturally tell that this attack of Su Pei's was extraordinary. They sensed the increasingly powerful aura within the light cluster. Everyone's bodies quickly pulled back until they reached the horizon. From this, one could tell just how powerful this light cluster was. Xiao Yan, on the other hand, still maintained a calm and indifferent manner in the face of this. It was as though all of this had nothing to do with him. Fifth brother, stop. Don't hurt yourself. Wait for me to exchange another 100 blows with this brat. Suddenly, an explosive cry was transmitted from the distant horizon. Soon after, a ray of light shot through the empty space in a lightning-like manner. In an instant, it flashed and arrived beside Xiao Yan. The powerful aura of an 8-star Do Zun suddenly poured down as a fist furiously smashed towards Xiao Yan. Brat, where did you come from? You are actually this arrogant just because you possess a little strength. Today, allow the old me to see just where your courage comes from. Ha! Xiao Yan's face remained indifferent in the face of the old man's furious cry. He did not even glance at the fist that was furiously flying over. Xiao Yan gently lifted his hand in front of the disbelieving eyes of everyone in the city. His palm gently met the old man's fist. A fist and a palm quietly arrived. When the two collided, the world was silent. It was as if nothing had happened. The old man's wild and powerful attack was just like an ordinary old man's fist. It did not have any power to speak of. How is this possible? Just who exactly are you? The expression of the old man instantly changed. He could clearly sense that the moment his fist made contact with the palm of this young man in front of him, the Do Qi within his body had already been completely sealed. At this moment, he was no different from an ordinary old man. In fact, he was even weaker than an ordinary old man. This kind of situation could only mean that the strength of this young man in front of him had already reached the frightening level of being extraordinary. It was definitely not a frightening existence that he could contend with. Could it be that this young man had already reached that kind of level? The level of a true expert. Doshang. Xiao Yan naturally saw through the thoughts of the old man. He exerted a little force with his palm and pushed it forward. A bang sound appeared and the old man flew backwards like a kite with its string cut. Chapter 87. How bold of you! Die for the old me! Suddenly, a couple of explosive cries were transmitted from the sky. Soon after, 5 rays of light cut through the sky and charged towards Xiao Yan. Ha! Mysterious sky waterfall. Soon after, 5 powerful Do Zun pressures came crushing towards Xiao Yan. The space around them became slightly distorted. This was the overbearingness of an elite Do Zun. The eyes of one of the old men, who had reached the strength of a 7-star Do Zun, emitted a glint. He appeared incomparably vicious. At the same time, the palms in front of his chest were opened and closed. Seals continued to appear on his palms. The Do Chi within his body swiftly gathered above his head, transforming into an energy waterfall. With a low cry, it violently smashed towards Xiao Yan. The other 4 elite Do Zuns had also poured their Do Chi into the energy waterfall, causing the waterfall's might to be even more shocking at this moment. Xiao Yan remained expressionless in the face of this. A mere Do Zun. From the way he saw it, a Do Zun was already considered an expert many years ago. Now, it was merely an ordinary person. Xiao Yan ignored the old man's Do Chi attack. His bright eyes looked at Su Zhan in an indifferent manner. His clear and bright voice was faintly emitted. See. Originally, I did not intend to do this. However, this group of elders of yours have insisted on attacking me because of those words of yours. You cannot blame me for this. Xiao Yan's indifferent tone caused Su Zhan's body to tremble. His entire face became as white as a sheet of paper. It was completely bloodless. It should be known that just a moment ago, his great-grandfather, who had reached the strength of an 8-star Do Zun, had been defeated by this brat in one strike in front of his eyes. One could imagine that this brat's strength had likely reached the 9th change of a Do Zun. Although Su Zhan thought in this manner in his heart, the expression on his face turned into a cold smile. He raised his hand and his palm turned into a fist. His thumb was lifted. After which, he turned it downwards and made a disdainful gesture. The corners of Su Zhan's mouth curled into a ferocious smile, making his whole face look a little twisted and crazy. His eyes were also full of ruthlessness. He raised his head and sneered at Xiao Yan with his nose in the air. You actually dare to utter such big words even when death is imminent. You really don't know your limits. Even if you have injured my grandfather, you will still die even if you are an expert 9-change Do Zun when faced with a full-force attack of 5 high-class Do Zuns. In the next moment, the old man who had used his Do skill on Xiao Yan also let out a cold laugh and shouted, Xiao Yan! Kid, you're already at death's door now, yet you actually dare to boast so shamelessly and act so arrogantly. You're truly courting death. Black Sky Waterfall. Destroy him for me. The large waterfall carried a frightening natural pressure as it violently struck towards Xiao Yan. The other 4 Do Zun elders also stared at Xiao Yan with ruthless faces. Powerful Do Zun auras poured out and heavily pressed towards Xiao Yan. Humph. Noisy. Just as the towering waterfall landed in the sky above Xiao Yan's head, Xiao Yan suddenly waved his large sleeve. An invisible energy instantly swept over the entire place. The full-force suppression of the 5 elite Do Zuns appeared to be nothing as it was instantly broken through. It swept in all directions without pausing. Among them, there were also 5 skinny figures that seemed to be dead. At this moment, the surrounding people, who had already dodged to 1,000 feet away, finally woke up. Their eyes were filled with horror as they looked at Xiao Yan. If I remember correctly, the elite Do Zun who had charged towards the sky earlier should be the current strongest person in the Su clan. Su Zhen's grandfather is a genuine 8-star peak Do Zun. He is only 1 step away from reaching the 9-star Do Zun class. The crowd immediately turned into an uproar after this voice was emitted. Even an ultimate expert, who was comparable to a 9-star Do Zun, was forced back by a single strike from that young man. Just how great was the strength of that young man? Since that old man is an 8-star Do Zun, it is likely that the weakest of the 5 elite Do Zuns who came after him is a 5-star Do Zun. At this moment, the crowd was also extremely shocked by this frightening lineup today. Just a young man had attracted a total of 7 elite Do Zuns. Even though this was the case, that young man was still able to forcefully suppress them. This ability really caused quite a number of people in the crowd to feel a fiery heat in their hearts. In one's life, by being able to achieve such an achievement at a young age, it was likely that one would be able to proudly face any kind of difficulty in the future. At this moment, Mu Ling was also using a shocked gaze to stare blankly at Xiao Yan. The muscles on his face seemed to have solidified. His mouth was also wide open and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that this person of the same age, who had inexplicably helped him, would actually possess such great strength. Even when the 5 elders of the Su clan attacked together, they were unable to last more than 1 round. Such strength could be said to be heaven-defying. Xiao Yan also revealed a calm and harmonious smile to Mu Ling. Only then did he break Mu Ling's stunned expression. Xiao Yan's gaze swept over the crowd of observers in the distant sky. After which, He turned his gaze toward Su Zhen. His expression contained traces of coldness. At this moment, the expression on Su Zhen's face had been replaced by an endless horror the moment the 5 elders were sent flying. At this moment, everything that the black-robed man before him had done today had completely crushed his arrogant heart. Just as Xiao Yan was about to make his move, the space in front of Su Zhen distorted and Su Pei's figure once again appeared. After his figure appeared, Su Pei flipped his hand and sent Su Zhen flying with a palm strike. His own body borrowed the force from the blow and charged towards Xiao Yan. "Zhener, hurry up and leave. Today, us old fellows might have to die here. Quickly leave this place and you must hide well. Do not come out if you do not have sufficient strength." As Su Zhen's figure flew backwards, Su Pei's final words completely fell into Su Zhen's ears. After hearing this, Su Zhen finally truly understood just how terrifying the strength of the person Su Pei was about to face was. With regards to this, a trace of impatience rose in Xiao Yan's heart. He did not say that he was going to kill anyone, but these old fellows insisted on risking their lives time and time again. This really made him somewhat angry in his heart. Humph! With a cold snort, Su Pei's forward-charging body suddenly stilled. Soon after, Xiao Yan slammed his palm forward. A bang sound appeared and Su Pei had already turned into nothingness. Not even a trace of flesh was left behind. This scene was no different from that elite Do Zong from earlier. Before Xiao Yan could act, another figure flashed and appeared in front of Su Zhen, who had just stopped his body. From the looks of it, this figure was Su Zhen's great-grandfather. Humph! You are really going all out. Xiao Yan raised his hand. A palm was thrown through the air and smashed towards Su Zhen's great-grandfather, that skinny old man who was merely an 8-star Do Zun. However, a layer of ruthlessness covered the face of Su Zhen's great-grandfather in the face of Xiao Yan's attack. He waved his hand and a jade scroll flashed and appeared in his palm. Without any hesitation, his shriveled hand suddenly clenched. The jade scroll instantly exploded into dust that scattered in all directions. At the same time, Xiao Yan's palm was also violently swung downwards. An enormous invisible hand appeared in front of the skinny old man. It ruthlessly slammed towards the skinny old man. Bang! A wave of water wave-like energy ripples spread 10 feet in front of the skinny old man. A Do Chi barrier also appeared and protected Su Zhen and the old man within it. Xiao Yan lifted his brows when he saw this scene. His eyes were a little surprised as he looked at the Do Chi barrier. This Do Chi barrier was actually set up by a Bandi expert. Is it because of the Jade Scroll from earlier? Looks like this Su clan has some story. Chapter 88. Ha! It is unexpected that such a small clan actually has an elite Bandi protecting them. They are really extraordinary. Xiao Yan's eyes were indifferent as he looked at the skinny old man. His expression was still calm. It was as though he viewed the Bandi as nothing. Humph! Brat, you are really arrogant. Even though you are an elite Do Shang, you are still just like an ant in front of a Bandi Zun. The corner of the skinny old man's mouth was lifted when he heard Xiao Yan's calm words. A cold smile was lifted before he emitted a cold snort. Clearly, he felt great disdain for Xiao Yan's ignorance. Xiao Yan involuntarily emitted a cold laugh in the face of the skinny old man's disdainful words. His hand, which had fallen, was once again lifted. He slammed it down towards the invisible barrier from a distance. This seemingly random attack caused the entire place to tremble. The space between Xiao Yan and the barrier was completely shattered into nothingness by this palm. The empty space shattered and an enormous strength that could support the sky suddenly appeared in front of the invisible barrier. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into an enormous hand that reached the sky. Before the skinny old man could react, the large hand that could support the sky had already collided with the barrier. The entire place shook in an instant. A deafening sonic boom swept over the place. A powerful airwave also swept in all directions from the middle of the collision. Its strength shook the entire place. Crack! An invisible clear sound appeared in the sky. Immediately, the skinny old man could clearly see that the invisible barrier in front of him had actually formed a tiny crack line at this moment. However, this was not the end. A crack line appeared. Within a couple of breaths' time, the invisible barrier had already cracked deeply. The entire barrier was filled with clear crack lines. Bang! A loud bang sounded. The invisible barrier suddenly burst apart under this sound. It turned into nothingness and disappeared from this place. The skinny old man's heart was suddenly startled when he saw this scene. His skinny face also revealed a shocked expression. This young man in front of him was actually, a half-martial emperor. Xiao Yan ignored the grandfather and grandson duo in front of him after the barrier was shattered. Instead, he turned his body and the dou qi in his body suddenly poured out and smashed toward the empty space beside his body. Boom! With a muffled sound, Xiao Yan's figure shook and took a few steps back. However, the ground beneath his feet had already transformed into an enormous pit that was 300 meters wide. The strength of a half-martial emperor was actually this powerful. He had merely been knocked back a few steps, yet he had created such a huge crater. It was likely that even an all-out attack from a peak Do Zun would have difficulty creating such a large hole. The might of a single step possessed a strength that far exceeded the peak of the Do Zun class. An elite bandit was really this frightening. You're a half-martial emperor, yet you've resorted to such lowly methods. This goes against your status. Xiao Yan's body did not move. His body stood in the empty air. The corner of his mouth contained a cold smile as he spoke in a faint voice. Humph. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. You never care about the process. Why do you need to be so obsessed with your face? A black purple-robed figure appeared after Xiao Yan's words sounded. He stood 100 feet in front of Xiao Yan. At the same time, a somewhat dry and hoarse mocking voice was emitted. Xiao Yan smiled. His face revealed a mocking expression as he coldly laughed. No wonder you have become like this. You have already become shameless. In front of Xiao Yan's eyes, half of that person's face appeared to have been splashed with sulfuric acid. It was unusually distorted and extremely frightening. These words of Xiao Yan had clearly struck a sore spot in this person's heart. The eyes that he used to look at Xiao Yan were even more ruthless. It was as though he wanted to bite Xiao Yan. His originally distorted face appeared even more frightening at this moment. However, suddenly, a burst of wild laughter was emitted from his mouth. Only then did he look at Xiao Yan. His eyes were filled with an ice-cold and indifferent expression. Stinking brat, this old man has been in power for many years. There are many people who have insulted and ridiculed this old man like you. I'm afraid that there are at least a few hundred of them. Do you know what happened to those people who insulted and ridiculed this old man? Xiao Yan's mouth lifted into a cold smile when he heard this. His tone was calm as he replied. They are all dead? The gaze that the old man used to look at Xiao Yan was even colder. A ferocious smile that caused one's heart to tremble appeared at the corner of his mouth. He mocked as he said, That's right. They were all killed by this old man. Not a single one of them managed to escape. Moreover, among them, there were several people who had reached the half-emperor level like you. The crowd standing at the edge of the sky immediately stood up after the old man's words sounded. According to what the old man had said, he had once killed an extraordinary expert at the half-emperor level. Didn't this mean that his strength was at the very least at the half-emperor level? Looking at Xiao Yan again, the sneak attack from this half-emperor level expert had been easily dealt with by him. In that case, wouldn't Xiao Yan's strength also be at the half-emperor level? In a single day, these wild cultivators, who spent their days on the edge of blades, had actually met 2 half-emperor level experts that they did not even dare to imagine. How could this not cause them to be shocked and moved? In merely an instant, the crowd that was about to erupt once again turned silent. The might of a half-emperor level expert was no joke. If any of them had really angered these two, it was likely that their seemingly large group would be turned into ashes with a single thought. At this point, the deterrence of a half-emperor level expert could be seen. No matter how wild and fearless a person was normally, they could only face a half-emperor with a fearful attitude. The suppression of a half-emperor level expert was not only limited to one's body, it was also true control over one's soul. In front of a half-emperor level expert, all one could feel was that all one's efforts would be a pile of bubbles. It was illusory and impossible. Today, the home ground of Yanluo City would definitely belong to these 2 people in front of them. Therefore, while the crowd was silent, all of them swiftly retreated. It should be known that even the aftershock of a half-emperor level expert's attack was completely enough to shatter them. Xiao Yan gently glanced at the rapidly retreating crowd. The corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Tilting his head to look at the old man with a distorted face, he smiled and said, Since they have already opened up a space for us, shouldn't our battle begin? The old man sneered. Below the distorted half of his face, There seemed to be countless worms squirming about. It was an exceptionally disgusting sight. "Brat, since you are in such a hurry to seek death, this old man shall lend you a hand today. He, little brat, prepare to die." Before the old man's mocking voice could fade, the shriveled body wrapped in a purplish-black long robe suddenly jerked and charged towards Xiao Yan. Withered Poison Palm. Chapter 89. Withered Poison Palm. The old man with a distorted face moved and arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Black and purple dough cheese swiftly gathered in his palm. Light flickered within his old eyes as a palm ruthlessly smashed towards Xiao Yan's face. Xiao Yan was not the least bit afraid of this. The old man was merely a 5-star half-D. Even an 8-star half-DD, Splitting Cloud Wolf, had been killed by him. What could this ugly old man do to him? With a flip of his hand, Xiao Yan's palm ruthlessly met the old man's palm head-on. Ancient God Seal. Even though it was a high-level D-class dough skill in the hands of a Ban Emperor expert, it was still extremely extraordinary and gave off a monstrous aura. The collision of the two caused the world to tremble. Even though there was such a great distance between them, some of the weaker cultivators still emitted a poochie sound and spat out a mouthful of blood from their bodies. Even the stronger ones involuntarily had a trace of blood seeping out from the corner of their mouths. Their faces had also instantly turned pale. A Ban Emperor expert was indeed worthy of being the true strongest in the Yuanwu continent. Even though there was a distance of 10,000 miles between them, it was as though there was nothing in their eyes. The palms of the two collided and separated upon contact. A wild and violent explosion spread from between the two. The powerful force caused many tiny cracks to appear in the surrounding space. It was as though the entire space would collapse in an instant with just a little more force. Octane Blast. Poison Finger. The two of them had just forced each other to take a step back when Xiao Yan and the old man in front of him once again moved. A thought passed through Xiao Yan's heart and the Octane Blast was unleashed. A flying kick swept toward the old man. The old man was not willing to be outdone. His shriveled hand instantly clenched into a fist. His finger carried a strength that could prop up the heavens as it ruthlessly smashed towards Xiao Yan's flying kick. Although this old man appeared ferocious and his entire body was as skinny as firewood, he was even inferior to an ordinary old man. However, the aura all over his body contained a ferocious overbearing strength that could shake the world. It did not match the appearance of his body at all. The old man's finger wasn't weak, but how could Xiao Yan's level 8 collapse be weak? Under the enhancement of the octane collapse, Xiao Yan's physical strength had already reached an extremely terrifying level. If it was just a competition of physical strength, then he probably wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he fought a half-martial emperor with the same strength. A finger and a leg, both carrying a terrifying aura that could destroy the world, rapidly approached. Space, which was already on the verge of collapse, finally could not endure such a terrifying force. It exploded with a bang and turned into a pitch-black endless space. Boom! Xiao Yan's leg and the finger violently smashed together. The old man's expression changed first. He did not expect that the physical body of this brat in front of him was actually so incomparably strong. He actually found it somewhat difficult to endure this attack. On the other hand, Xiao Yan's strong and ferocious strength was revealed after the two powerful dough cheese cancelled each other out. His powerful physical strength allowed him to be in an invincible position. No matter how strong the old man in front of him was, he was unable to hurt Xiao Yan at all. Humph! Brat, don't think that you can defeat me just because you have some strength. Just relying on strength to fight with me is not enough. The old man's face did not show any anger after suffering a loss. Instead, he coldly laughed as he looked at Xiao Yan and spoke. A glint flashed deep within Xiao Yan's eyes when he heard these words. The corners of his mouth lifted into a playful smile. He also coldly laughed as he replied. In that case, may I know what you mean by these words? The old man felt some anger in his heart when he heard Xiao Yan's act of ignorance. This brat was already in trouble, yet he still dared to ask such a question. This really caused him to feel a little surprised. Humph! Brat, you are really arrogant. My withered poison palm and poison centipede finger are high-level ultimate skills from the super faction in the middle region, the Du AI sect. Both of them dominate the world with their potent poison. If the two of them were to be added together, the poison would multiply. You actually dare to be so arrogant even after being poisoned. You are really seeking death. Xiao Yan lifted his brows when he heard the old man's words. Du AI sect, a faction in the Middle Region. Could this old man be someone from the Middle Region? Oh, Do AI sect, huh? It still exists. However, I wonder if the current Do AI sect is still the same Do AI sect from back then. Suddenly, Gu Yu's somewhat emotional voice was transmitted into Xiao Yan's heart, causing Xiao Yan to raise his brows again. Just how long had this crossing disaster sect existed? It actually caused Gu Yu to sigh endlessly. Old Gu, do you know about this Do AI sect? Xiao Yan involuntarily asked when he heard Gu Yu's emotional sigh. Gu Yu smiled faintly in his heart as he replied to Xiao Yan. Do AI sect was founded 5,000 years ago. The Crossing Disaster sect was established 5,000 years ago, and its founder was an expert whose strength had reached the Great Origin Saint stage. His status was the same as the little girl you met in Qingyang City. He also had the woeful poison body. Xiao Yan's mind suddenly shook when these words sounded. His heart was filled with surprise. The Do AI sect had been established by someone with the woeful poison body. Moreover, the most unbelievable thing was that the person with the woeful poison body had actually reached the Great Origin Saint stage. The Great Origin Saint stage was the true top expert of the entire Yuanwu continent. However, Xiao Yan frowned in the blink of an eye. He involuntarily felt some doubt in his heart. Back then, the little fairy doctor had been a Do Zun, but she had already had difficulty suppressing the woeful poison body. If she had not gathered the monster core of the sky poison dragon scorpion beast and many other natural treasures, it would have been difficult for her to control it. However, the woeful poison body from the ancient times had reached the Great Origin Saint stage. How could this gap not cause Xiao Yan to feel suspicious? There is no need to think too much. That person's strength has indeed reached the Origin Saint stage. Moreover, the woeful poison body within her body has yet to erupt. Huh? Since it had yet to erupt, did that not mean that the woeful poison body of that person had not been suppressed? She is extraordinary. Ever since she started training, she has forcefully suppressed the woeful poison body each time it erupts. Even until the day she dies, it is still the same. Xiao Yan's heart was once again startled when he heard this. This person was truly an extraordinary person. The determination in her heart was truly unparalleled. Just as Xiao Yan was about to open his mouth to ask something, the old man's body shook. Purple-black Do Qi swiftly gathered in his palm as a palm attacked Xiao Yan once again. Xiao Yan involuntarily frowned when he saw this. A cold snort was emitted from his nose. His body shook as Do Qi instantly surged from his palm. His right hand was suddenly clenched into a fist as he threw a punch at the old man. Chapter 90. Withered Poison Palm. Purple-black Do Qi continued to spew out from the old man's palm. This technique was actually the extremely poisonous withered poison palm. Xiao Yan's expression remained unchanged in the face of this. After all, regardless of how poisonous his Do Qi was, it was as though it was nothing in front of a heavenly flame. Xiao Yan threw a punch forward. All the strength in his body poured out and violently smashed towards the old man's palm, which had already turned purple-black. Octane Blast. It was another Octane Blast. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yan had already arrived in front of the old man. His right fist violently smashed towards the shriveled palm. Bang! One fist and one palm separated upon contact. However, without waiting for them to rest, the two figures once again collided. The originally pitch-black ink-like endless empty space appeared even more empty at this moment. In merely a short moment, the two of them had already exchanged over 300 blows. Each blow was ruthless and each one was fatal. If it were not for the fact that the two of them were different from ordinary people, it was likely that they would have to pay quite a hefty price. The surrounding crowd had already retreated to an even further place in the horizon. If they did not flee further away from such a huge battle, it was likely that the many cultivators in Yanluo City could only end their lives here today. Xiao Yan and the old man each stood on one side of the endless empty space in the sky. Some tiny beads of perspiration hung on Xiao Yan's forehead. Occasionally, some perspiration would roll down Xiao Yan's face, wetting a corner of Xiao Yan's clothes. At this moment, the auras of the two had become somewhat unstable. Clearly, this endless battle was still unbearable for the both of them even though their strength had already reached the half-emperor level. Humph! Brat, after receiving 300 withered poison palms from this old man, the poison within has already entered your body. As long as this old man wills it, the poison will immediately erupt. Today, you will definitely die in my hands. Kik. At this moment, this old man with a distorted face appeared to be in an extremely miserable state. His grayish-white long hair was scattered in front of him. His purple-black long robe had also turned into pieces. However, the gaze he used to look at Xiao Yan was filled with a bloodthirst. Hearing the madman's words, the corners of Xiao Yan's mouth lifted into a sneer, and the playful look in his eyes became even stronger. A ferocious expression was revealed on the madman's distorted face when he saw this. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness. At this moment, he was already prepared to enjoy Xiao Yan's painful appearance when the poison acted up. The old man stared ferociously at Xiao Yan. With a thought, he waited for the moment when Xiao Yan showed fear on his face. Unfortunately, for a full 5 breaths' time, Xiao Yan did not move at all under the old man's tight gaze. Instead, Xiao Yan only smiled as he looked at the old man. At this moment, a grave expression appeared on the old man's distorted face. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at Xiao Yan. How is this possible? How can you control it? Even if you are an alchemist, even if you have a divine pill, it is impossible for you to completely suppress this withered poison palm. What exactly? Without waiting for the old man to finish speaking, Xiao Yan had already made his move. Xiao Yan extended his right hand in front of him and pointed at the old man in the distance. A cold smile was lifted from the corners of his mouth. With a thought, a cluster of gorgeous flames appeared in Xiao Yan's palm with a puff sound. When the old man saw the gorgeous flame in Xiao Yan's palm, his originally distorted face suddenly tensed up at this moment. Numerous ferocious wiggling gullies appeared on his eye-catching scar. A long while later, the old man's eyes continued to stare intently at the flame in Xiao Yan's palm. His eyes were without spirit. Only 15 minutes later did he use a hoarse voice and trembling lips to speak with a face filled with disbelief. How is this possible? This is impossible. How can it be a heavenly flame? That was impossible. All the heavenly flames in the world have already formed a spirit. Unless one is a talented individual, how can one obtain their favor? How can you obtain it? Xiao Yan merely laughed in the face of the old man's nonsense. All the heavenly flames in the world had a spirit. This point was something that Old Bone had told him long ago. However, his heavenly flame originated from the Do-Chi continent. Why would he need the acknowledgement of those fellows? At this moment, the old man was speaking such crazy words. This naturally caused Xiao Yan to laugh coldly. With a flip of his hand, the heavenly flame was absorbed into his body. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth once again smiled. He coldly laughed at the old man and said, "I did not have enough fun fighting just now. Let's do it again." Congealing fire finger. Xiao Yan's body moved and had already arrived beside the old man. He extended his finger and a gorgeous flame swiftly wrapped around Xiao Yan's finger. Wherever this finger passed, the world was destroyed. The endless empty space, which had just recovered a little, was once again shattered into pieces by this finger. The Do-Chi on Xiao Yan's finger gathered with all his might. The gorgeous flame appeared to have agglomerated into a substance. It carried a flying swan aura that could break the world as it pointed directly at the old man's life gate with the intention of determining life and death. At this moment, the old man could no longer be bothered about whether Xiao Yan had a heavenly flame on his body. No matter what, the two of them would definitely have a big battle today. If he was afraid of Xiao Yan at this moment, it was likely that he would no longer have the opportunity to fight. So what if he has a heavenly flame on his body? It is merely a wisp of heavenly flame essence. Not to mention a wisp of source energy. Even if his true body appears today, this old man will make sure that he doesn't return alive. Xiao Yan involuntarily raised his eyebrows when he heard this. A certain fellow within his body seemed to be a little unhappy. The old man did not dare to underestimate Xiao Yan's finger. His body forcefully turned in the air and his finger met Xiao Yan's congealing fire finger. Poison weeping finger. This poison weeping finger was even more solid than before. Rich purple-black Do-Chi gathered at one spot, causing the might of this finger to be even stronger than before. Bang! Xiao Yan's body did not move at all after the finger was pointed. A cold smile appeared on his face as his body suddenly shook. An enormous force poured out from his finger and violently smashed onto the old man's body. Bang! The old man was clearly unable to endure any longer. Even though he was a 5-star half-emperor, he was still unable to reverse the situation with the heavenly flame. His body had just pulled back when Xiao Yan once again followed closely behind. The old man's expression changed. He could not be bothered about his miserable appearance as his body did a donkey roll in the air. Only then did he dodge Xiao Yan's attack. Damn it! Brat, you are really the first person to cause the old me to suffer in such a manner. The old me admits that you possess extraordinary strength with the heavenly flame in your body. Even though this is the case, the old me will definitely end you here today. The old man's body suddenly shook before his voice sounded. A monstrous aura spread out from within his body. His shriveled hand was pulled back in front of his chest. His finger moved continuously and numerous complicated seals were formed. The aura of the old man also soared at an extremely frightening speed. Brat, since you possess the heavenly flame in your body and possess the heavenly flame in your body today, you can also have a taste of this old me's 10,000 poison body. Take a look at this old me's 10,000 poison body. Before his voice sounded, a purple-black lotus poison seal appeared between the old man's distorted brows. Following the appearance of this lotus poison seal, the old man's aura also soared in an instant. His originally powerful aura swept apart like a monstrous wave at this moment, causing the entire Yanluo city to tremble unceasingly at this moment. Xiao Yan's eyebrows were tightly knit together the moment he saw the purple-black poison seal between the old man's brows. This old fellow actually also possessed the woeful poison body. However, Xiao Yan's grave expression recovered in an instant. Although he also possessed the woeful poison body, this old fellow was like Bing He Zunja back then. It was a man-made, woeful poison body. It was many times weaker than a genuine woeful poison body. Not only that, under Xiao Yan's senses, this old fellow's 10,000 poison body was still much weaker than Bing He Zunja back then. It was completely an incomplete half-finished product. Originally, I was planning to play with you a couple of times. However, since this is the case, it will be extremely easy to deal with you. Thinking back then, Bing He Zunja was indeed extraordinary from Xiao Yan's point of view. He was able to endure the pain of turning into a woeful poison body. However, it was also because of this that Xiao Yan also felt a little interested in him. Additionally, he was familiar with the meridians of the woeful poison body. The few meridians that needed to be used in this half-finished product had already been completely familiarized by Xiao Yan. At this moment, it could be said that it was extremely easy for him to deal with this old fellow. Ha! Arrogant brat. Even if you have the heavenly flame protecting your body, you will definitely fall under my poison today. 10,000 poison body. 10,000 mile destruction. Great desolate weeping poison. Exterminate. The old fellow's body suddenly shook after his voice sounded. Purple-black dough chi instantly surged out. The entire place was covered by this poison fog that permeated the sky in an instant. Even among the crowd, who had already withdrawn tens of thousands of kilometers away, there were people whose faces instantly turned grayish-black under this poison fog at this moment. Dark black blood flowed out from their 7 orifices. In merely a moment, many people, who could be considered experts in Yanluo City, had already turned into a pool of blood before completely disappearing from this world. Even those who were not poisoned did their best to maneuver the little dough chi within their bodies to wrap around themselves and do their best to resist. At this moment, Yanluo City had already turned into a dead city. Any place where there were people had turned into a pool of blood. Where there were no people, the land was barren and all life had been extinguished. After this battle, this Yanluo City would no longer have any life in the next 100 years. Even though this was the case, Xiao Yan's face remained calm. Only when the poison fog attacked did he slowly raise his hand. He extended a finger and a light flickered on his finger. A cluster of thumb-sized flame, which looked like it could be extinguished at any moment, slowly rose. Immediately, Xiao Yan pressed his finger forward. A water-like flame ripple spread out. Wherever the flame passed, the purple-black poison fog in the sky appeared to be like ice that had encountered a raging fire. A chi-chi sound was emitted. After which, it turned into a clear fog and disappeared into the empty space. The old fellow's distorted face instantly changed when he saw this scene. However, before he could do anything, Xiao Yan's distant figure flashed. He used the sky extinction step and appeared beside the old fellow in a flash. Fire lotus, break. With a thought, countless small angry Buddha fire lotuses appeared around Xiao Yan's body. His right fist was suddenly clenched and Xiao Yan's fist carried an overwhelming might as it suddenly smashed toward the old fellow. Bang! An explosion sounded. In an instant, this entire place was swallowed by the endless empty space. The poison fog that permeated the sky also disappeared in an instant. The wild and violent Do Chi wave was only completely swallowed by the endless empty space when it was about to reach the countless number of people. The crowd once again retreated by thousands of kilometers after being shaken. They were afraid that they would be implicated again. A half-D expert was indeed frightening. Even this world had difficulty restraining them. It was really impossible to imagine just how powerful those true experts at the peak of the continent would be once they attacked. It was likely that with a casual flip of their palm, the entire continent would instantly crumble apart. It was a long while later before this place returned to its natural state. The clothes of the old man with a distorted face were completely torn in front of everyone's eyes. Fresh blood had already turned his entire body into a bloody person, causing him to appear even more ferocious and frightening. If one were to look carefully, one would be able to discover that the body of this old fellow was actually a little illusionary. In order to fight Xiao Yan, this old fellow had actually self-destructed his bandy body. When one looked at Xiao Yan again, although he was in a much better state compared to this old fellow, the palm imprint on his chest was also quite eye-catching. The dark red palm imprint informed everyone that even though Xiao Yan had the heavenly flame on his body, he was still unable to avoid being eroded by the poison force in the face of this old fellow's full-force attack. This old fellow's full-force attack could be said to be frightening. This old fellow had actually used his life to exchange for Xiao Yan's life at the last moment. He wanted to perish together with Xiao Yan. He sacrificed all of his essence blood and gathered all of his poison force. Using his physical body as a medium, he self-destructed his bandy body and collided with Xiao Yan. Unfortunately, even though this was the case, Xiao Yan, who had the heavenly flame on his body, used the emperor flame to forcefully resist. Therefore, this old fellow had difficulty injuring him. The might of the heavenly flame was clearly extraordinary. Cough cough. That heavenly flame of yours, just what kind of heavenly flame? At this moment, this old fellow finally understood the situation. Xiao Yan might seem ordinary, but his explosive strength was sufficient to fight against him. Moreover, he had the protection of the heavenly flame. The poison force that he was so proud of was completely useless. Although he could cause Xiao Yan to be eroded by the poison force, as long as Xiao Yan was willing to pay a huge price, he would definitely be able to get rid of it. Therefore, he would definitely lose today's battle. This was a foregone conclusion. When Xiao Yan heard this old fellow's words, he clearly understood in his heart that these should be his last words. Since that was the case, there was no harm in saying them. His heart paused for a moment. Xiao Yan's eyes focused on the old fellow. His lips parted slightly and a calm voice was transmitted into the old fellow's ears alone. This flame is called the Emperor Flame. In an instant, the old fellow's eyes suddenly widened. The depths of his eyes were filled with horror. His mouth continuously muttered that word. Emperor Flame. Emperor Flame. Tisk, you do. I never imagined that a traitor of the Crossing Adversity sect like you would actually have such a day. Suddenly, a dark mocking voice was quietly emitted from the empty space. This caused the entire space to freeze slightly. The expression on Xiao Yan's face instantly became gloomy after this voice was emitted. Third Hole Master, you have finally appeared. Chapter 91. I never imagined that the Flame Emperor, who fought so fiercely with us 7 half-emperors back then, would be injured by a mere 5-star half-emperor. When these words were spoken, the old man with a distorted face was the first to tremble. His originally illusory body became even more illusory at this moment. Facing 7 half-martial emperors by himself, such strength was truly not something that he could contend against. Xiao Yan completely ignored the Third Hall Master's words. With a wave of his hand, the heavy Xian ruler, which was on the verge of shattering, fell into Xiao Yan's palm. As he held the ruler's hilt, Xiao Yan stared at the Third Hall Master with an ice-cold expression and said in an icy tone, "Third Hall Master, do you remember where the crack on the ruler's body came from?" The Third Hall Master was also stunned by Xiao Yan's words. He casually glanced at the heavy Xian ruler, which was on the verge of shattering. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he sneered. "Of course I remember. This crack was left behind by a palm strike from me. However, this heavy Xian ruler is not bad. The The ruler's body is made from flaming meteorite mysterious iron. It is truly indestructible. Even now, I can still remember the numbness I felt at that time. TSK 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 TSK. Before the third hallmaster's words had even left his mouth, Xiao Yan's expression had already turned extremely gloomy. A light flashed in his palm as he withdrew the heavy Xian ruler. His body moved as he suddenly executed the sky extinction step and charged toward the third hallmaster. TSK 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 TSK. You are not in your best condition now. How can it be so easy to defeat me again? Today, this old man has come fully prepared. After the third hallmaster's words left his mouth, he flipped his shriveled palm across the air. A pitch-black pearl appeared in his hand. This pearl did not look like much. However, the endless darkness within it caused one to feel a sense of pressure for no reason. When Xiao Yan saw the bead for the first time, a palm-sized jade bottle in the middle-grade storage ring on his hand trembled slightly at this moment, as if it was calling out to something. When Xiao Yan saw that the bead was incomparably strange, he did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in his heart. His body, which was charging forward, once again shook. In a flash, he had appeared beside the third hallmaster. Fire Lotus. A low cry sounded and the natural energy swiftly gathered. The heavenly flame within Xiao Yan's body suddenly moved. In merely an instant, the third hallmaster and Xiao Yan were already surrounded by the small, angry Buddha lotus flame that permeated the sky. If such a large number of angry Buddha lotus flames were to erupt, it was likely that this entire place would be destroyed in an instant. When the third palace master saw this, he let out a sharp cold laugh. The old face under the mask was filled with disdain. His shriveled hand suddenly clenched, and the black bead in his hand instantly exploded. In merely an instant, the empty space, which had just returned to normal, once again turned into endless darkness at this moment. Heavy spirit region, open. The third hallmaster let out an explosive cry. In an instant, the sky was filled with an extremely dense, dark energy. Under this energy, even Xiao Yan immediately felt an incomparably terrifying gravity pressing down on him, causing him to be unable to move even an inch. In this heavy spirit region, it is time for you to restrain your agility and speed that you are so proud of. Today you, the Flame Emperor, will definitely be mine. The heavy spirit region was forcefully refined by the elites of my ghost temple sect by fusing millions of spirits. Once it is unleashed, anyone who is not a member of my ghost temple sect or has received my approval will be forcefully suppressed and unable to move even an inch. The third hallmaster crossed his arms in front of his chest. His eyes were filled with mockery as he looked at Xiao Yan's body, which was almost frozen in the air. A bloody smile appeared at the corner of his mouth under the mask. His body moved and he had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan. A bloodthirsty light flickered in his eyes. His claw struck out and viciously clawed at Xiao Yan's chest. Ha! King Kong glass body. Dragon Phoenix ancient armor. Break it. At this moment, Xiao Yan did not dare to relax even a little. He suddenly let out an explosive cry in his heart and instantly unleashed the King Kong glass body. The Dragon Phoenix bloodline in his body was instantly activated. Pieces of purple gold dragon scales instantly covered Xiao Yan's entire body. Level 8 collapse. Break the mountains and rivers. With a furious roar, Xiao Yan's 1,000 feet tall body suddenly moved. The terrifying pressure within the heavy spirit region was completely ignored by Xiao Yan at this moment. Flame region. Break it. With a punch, the entire world shook. Heavenly flames that could burn the heavens and devour the earth gushed out from the surface of Xiao Yan's body and swept across the heavy spirit region. 10,000 flames destroy evil. Angry Buddha lotus flame. Explode. Boom. A rumbling sound that shook the world was suddenly emitted from the heavy spirit region. Yanluo city below had already been blasted into a bottomless abyss. This ancient city had completely disappeared from this world at this moment. The endless crowd had already scattered and fled in all directions. This place had already turned into a true Azura purgatory. The only ones who remained were Su Zhan and his great-grandfather. Of course, Mu Ling was rescued by Xiao Yan. Naturally, he was also waiting in the sky for the end of this battle. Today's battle could be said to be terrifying. It was the biggest battle that they had ever witnessed in their lives. 3 elite half-D Zune experts and tens of thousands of miles of land were instantly destroyed within a day. Today's battle would definitely be recorded in the annals of the southwestern border. This was because there would definitely be a half-D-Zune expert falling in Yenluo City today. Everything that Xiao Yan had done was naturally reflected in the eyes of the third hall chief. Being able to forcefully perform such swift actions under such great gravity had indeed caused the third hall chief to feel surprised for Xiao Yan in his heart. Xiao Yan's growth ability was indeed extremely frightening. It was likely that it had only been over 20 years since his true rise. However, it was during these 20 years that Xiao Yan's strength was comparable to some of the true geniuses on the Origin Martial Continent. However, the more this was the case, the greater the fear that the third hall chief felt for Xiao Yan in his heart became. If Xiao Yan were to truly grow in the future, it was likely that even their ghost temple gate would follow in Hun Tiandi's footsteps. This was something that they would not allow to happen. Hence, the third hall chief must bring Xiao Yan back today. Xiao Yan, the old me admits that you are indeed one of the few great geniuses that the old me acknowledges. Your training talent can be said to be monstrous. Unfortunately, you and I belong to this world. Bringing you back to our sect is an important task for the old me. Hence, I will have to ask you to make a trip with the old me today. Heavy Spirit Region, Spirit Solidifying Palm. A hoarse cry sounded. The third hall chief's body flashed and withdrew 1,000 feet away. The seal in his hand changed rapidly. Soon after, countless dark black spirits appeared out of nowhere within the Heavy Spirit Region. They were absorbed into the third hall chief's palm following the seal in his hand. Spirit Solidifying Palm. Breaking the world. A large dark black palm slowly appeared a couple of dozen feet in front of the third hall master. Waves of ghost-like howls were emitted from it. Countless numbers of souls also surfaced on the palm. Their faces, which appeared to be in extreme pain, appeared even darker and deathly still. Humph! You bunch of things that are neither human nor ghost. Today I, Xiao Yan, shall learn a thing or two from you. Flame Domain, Fallen Heart Flame, destroying the evil and devouring the spirit. Purifying Demonic Lotus Flame. Incinerate the world. The frightening pressure around Xiao Yan's body temporarily disappeared after the angry Buddha Lotus Flame appeared. Xiao Yan's body also became lighter. Both of his hands were waved. The Fallen Heart Flame and the Purifying Demonic Lotus Flame emitted a puff sound as they rose from his palm. The invisible flame emitted wave after wave of invisible fire airwaves. The Heavy Spirit Region emitted a chi-chi sound wherever it passed. A large black fog appeared in the empty space. The Purifying Demonic Lotus Flame in Xiao Yan's other hand had also turned into a beautiful pink lotus flower. It slowly lingered in Xiao Yan's palm. A circular fire airwave spread with each rotation. The spiritual strength, which had just been refined by the Fallen Heart Flame, was completely refined by the Purifying Demonic Lotus Flame at this moment. The palm-sized jade bottle in Xiao Yan's storage ring emitted a weak glow after the spiritual strength was refined to a pure state. Immediately, the pure spiritual strength drifted into Xiao Yan's storage ring uncontrollably. Soon after, it was absorbed by the jade bottle. All of this might seem obvious, but no one present discovered it. Even Gu Yu was completely unaware of this. Chapter 92. Bang! With a loud bang, Xiao Yan and the third hallmaster each took 100 steps back. The third hallmaster did not expect that Xiao Yan was still able to unleash such a powerful strength despite the strong suppression of the Heavy Spirit Region. Xiao Yan's technique was the first that the third hallmaster had ever seen among the younger generation. The Flame Emperor Xiao Yan really lives up to his reputation. The third hallmaster panted heavily. A pair of dark eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan under the mask. A somewhat hoarse voice was slowly emitted from his mouth. The third hallmaster is indeed worthy of being the hallmaster of the Hall of Souls. Your strength is really not bad. The words from the third hallmaster's mouth caused Xiao Yan's expression to become even colder. His tone was also extremely cold. At this moment, the two of them appeared to be extremely miserable. The third hallmaster's black robe was also in tatters. Waves of black fog surged out of the third hallmaster's body and lingered around him. A fiery red flame palm print could be seen at a glance in front of his chest. The strength of this palm was so great that it caused the third hallmaster's chest to cave in by an inch. It caused one to involuntarily feel a wave of horror when looking at it. One could vaguely see traces of blood flowing at the corner of the black mask that covered his face. This indicated that the third hallmaster was injured. Compared to the third hallmaster, Xiao Yan appeared to be in a much better state. The heavy pressure from the Heavy Spirit Region seemed to have been completely destroyed by Xiao Yan. Of course, this was not the case. With the addition of the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor and the King Kong glass body, Xiao Yan's defense had reached an extremely frightening level. Even though this was the case, the Third Hall Chief's powerful strength still caused Xiao Yan to suffer serious injuries. The golden light that flowed over the enormous body of the King Kong glass body had already become extremely dim. The dragon scales that covered the surface of Xiao Yan's body had already disappeared. Under the golden light, one could vaguely see some fresh blood rolling down Xiao Yan's strong arm. At a glance, it was a little frightening. On Xiao Yan's enormous body, there were a countless number of clear fist imprints on his chest that entered one's eyes. The fist imprints were extremely deep, causing Xiao Yan's chest to appear just like uneven ground. It was a tragic sight that one could not bear to look at. The two of them had exchanged over 100 blows, but they were evenly matched. Although the Third Hall Master was a 7-star Ban Emperor, he was still forcefully suppressed in front of Xiao Yan's terrifying Dragon Phoenix bloodline. With the Dragon Phoenix bloodline and the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor, Xiao Yan's current defense was comparable to the orthodox ancient Void Dragon tribe. He was a true human-shaped shield. The body of the dragon tribe was so terrifying that the Third Hall Master did not dare to casually face a young dragon. Moreover, Xiao Yan's current defense was so terrifying that the Third Hall Master could not easily suppress him. Fortunately, Xiao Yan's current strength was still too weak. Even with the Dragon Phoenix bloodline as a supplement, it was still difficult for him to suppress the Third Hall Master. This gave the Third Hall Master a chance to counterattack. Otherwise, it was likely that the Third Hall Master would have died in Xiao Yan's hands, even if he had the heavy spirit region as his strongest suppression. The Third Hall Master narrowed his eyes and scanned his surroundings. His gaze then landed on Yu Du, who was only left with his soul. A light flashed deep in his eyes, and the Third Hall Master's words drifted into Yu Du's ears. Old ghost Yu Du, I can see that you have been escaping from the Du-Yi sect for many years. I believe that you don't want to easily lose such a happy life, right? The expression in old ghost Yu Du's eyes changed. His dry lips trembled slightly. He lifted his eyelids, only to see that the Third Hall Master was focusing all his attention on Xiao Yan. Only then did he react and transmit a question back. Who exactly are you? Qu'est-ce? Old ghost Yu Du, don't tell me that you can't tell who I am. You are that group of ghost things from the Ghost Temple sect. The Third Hall Master's words were clear. The expression in Yu Du's eyes became increasingly fearful as he immediately replied. However, the Third Hall Master could not help but laugh mockingly. What are the people from my Ghost Temple sect? TSK. Compared to my Ghost Temple sect, your Du-Yi sect doesn't seem to be any better. For the sake of upgrading his woeful poison body and allowing himself to possess a genuine woeful poison body, he actually wanted to forcefully devour the sect's holy maiden. Such methods are not the least bit inferior to those of my Ghost Temple sect. TSK. The old me has already severed my relationship with the Du-Yi sect. What does the matter of the Du-Yi sect have to do with the old me? If you have something to say, just say it. If there is nothing, don't implicate the old me. The old me is a person who is about to die. It is not in vain to seek longevity. The Third Hall Master laughed sinisterly when he heard this. He ignored the indifference on Yu Du's face as he smiled and said, That's right. You, whose strength is not a Do-Di, will indeed not be able to last for long in your spiritual state. Although there are 3 living bodies here, their strength is ultimately insufficient to accommodate your spirit. The Third Hall Master paused when he spoke until this point. He did not say anything else. A desolate dark glow appeared deep within Yu Du's eyes. There was also fear contained within it. Who didn't fear death? Even if it was Yu Du, an old monster who had lived for God knows how many years, if he could survive, Yu Du, would definitely not think about facing death. The Third Hall Master had also seen this little fear deep within Yu Du's heart. Hence, he spoke in such a manner in order to stir up the hope of living in Yu Du's heart. You want the old me to join hands with you to deal with this matter together? Yu Du's dry throat involuntarily moved a little. He forcefully suppressed the emotions in his heart and opened his mouth to ask. The Third Hall Master also understood in his heart when he saw this. He coldly laughed in his heart and transmitted a message. Brother Yu Du is indeed worthy of being a person who has lived for a long time. This is exactly what I am thinking in my heart. Yu Du had already been completely bewitched by the Third Hall Master with these words. Even though he was still on guard in his heart, How could the current Yudu fight against the third Hall Master who was at his peak condition? All of this was definitely within the third Hall Master's control. The things that had happened between the two of them might appear to have taken a long time, but if they were to be separated, it was merely a matter of a few breaths. A bandee was able to freely use any amount of time. A few breaths was already enough for them to do many things. The two of them had just finished their discussion when the third Hall Master had already focused all of his attention on Xiao Yan. His eyes narrowed and a stern expression flashed across them. Flame D Xiao Yan. TSK 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 TSK. Try and receive an attack from the old me. Heavy spirit region. Rise for me. An explosive cry sounded. Another layer of dark black ink-like darkness came pressing down on Xiao Yan's body outside of the empty space that was covered by an endless amount of flame. In just an instant, the flame domain that Xiao Yan had created with endless heavenly flames was forcefully pushed back, as if it had shrunk. It only stopped when it was 1,000 feet away from Xiao Yan's body. Xiao Yan could not help but frown when he saw this. This heavy spirit region was actually so powerful. Even with the support of the flame domain, Xiao Yan still felt an extremely powerful gravitational force pressing down on his body, causing Xiao Yan's aura to become slightly heavier. When the third Hall Master saw this, the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer under the mask. His body moved and he retreated 100 steps. He raised both of his hands in front of his chest, and the seals in his hands changed rapidly. The space in front of the third Hall Master twisted, and a pitch-black darkness appeared in front of him. Without any hesitation, the third Hall Master plunged into it. Instantly, within the range of Xiao Yan's spiritual power, all of the third Hall Master's aura disappeared instantly, as if he had never appeared. It was extremely strange. Xiao Yan's expression changed slightly. He did not expect the third Hall Master to have such a trick up his sleeve. In this case, it would be much more difficult to deal with the third Hall Master. Just as Xiao Yan was about to move, the space beside him surged. Wave-like ripples spread out from the space beside Xiao Yan. Immediately, a withered palm suddenly slammed out, viciously slamming towards Xiao Yan's head. Xiao Yan was initially shocked by this sudden attack, but he quickly reacted. As his body retreated, he also slammed out a palm, violently slamming it against the palm. At the moment of collision, a huge force was transmitted from Xiao Yan's palm, forcing Xiao Yan to take half a step back. On the other hand, Xiao Yan's powerful palm slammed out across the air, but it did not hit anything. What exactly is this thing? It's actually so powerful. Not only did his attack fail, but he had also suffered a hidden loss. This caused Xiao Yan to feel extremely fearful in his heart. However, even though he was fearful, Xiao Yan also understood in his heart that the third Hall Master would not be able to hold on for long given his current condition. Otherwise, he would have used this method from the start. After making up his mind, Xiao Yan also poured out all of his spiritual strength, wrapping it within 100 feet radius around him. Only in this way would Xiao Yan be able to react as quickly as possible when danger approached. Chi with a chi sound, Xiao Yan's body turned on the spot. His palm violently slammed out, violently slamming towards a certain turbulent space behind him. Yellow Spring Palm. Xiao Yan threw his palm forward and the turbulent space instantly stilled. Immediately, it shook a couple of times before it recovered its calmness. Xiao Yan, on the other hand, continued to carefully observe the space around him as he waited for the third Hall Master to appear. Bang! Buddha Palm. Suddenly, the space above Xiao Yan's head became distorted. An enormous towering palm appeared out of nowhere. It carried an imposing aura that could cover the sky as it pressed down on Xiao Yan. The strength of the palm was so great that it was difficult for Xiao Yan's body to move like a stone statue. However, how could Xiao Yan allow himself to be trampled on? The Do Qi in his body suddenly erupted. The strength of the heavenly flame instantly spread out. The burning, heavenly flame instantly wrapped around Xiao Yan, forming a countless number of fire clusters of similar size within 1,000 feet of Xiao Yan. Soon after, under a thought from Xiao Yan, the countless number of fire clusters suddenly flickered. They instantly transformed into countless number of fire pillars that shot towards the sky. Their aura was like a rainbow as they attempted to break the enormous palm. The third Hall Master was clearly quite afraid of Xiao Yan's heavenly flame. Hence, he revealed his body from the heavy spirit region. In a flash, he had already appeared above the enormous palm. The enormous force under his feet shook. The speed of the enormous palm, which was already swiftly slamming down, became a little faster. In an instant, it collided with the countless number of fire pillars. Bang! A wild and ferocious storm instantly swept across the entire sky, causing the land within a radius of 10,000 miles to be covered by a layer of fog. The originally clear sky also turned dark at this moment. The countless number of fire pillars that reached the sky still stood proudly in the sky within the heavy spirit region. They each occupied a piece of land with the enormous palm, standing equally against it. The third hallmaster was clearly extremely dissatisfied with this. Even after using the suppression of the heavy spirit region, he was still unable to quickly finish off Xiao Yan. If news of this were to spread, his reputation as the hallmaster would likely become a laughingstock. Humph! With a cold snort, the third hallmaster suddenly waved his hand. The seals in his hand rapidly changed. Soon after, one could see the heavy spirit region, which encompassed the entire world, rapidly shrink at this moment. In just a moment, the heavy spirit region, which covered the entire sky, had already shrunk to a few thousand feet in size. The power within it was naturally stacked up. After the third hallmaster completed all of this, Xiao Yan's expression became completely grave. At this moment, it was extremely difficult for Xiao Yan to even move a finger. Even the fire pillars that reached the sky seemed to be forcefully pressed down by this extremely frightening gravity. One could imagine the true power of the heavy spirit region. The muscles all over Xiao Yan's body tensed up. The Dragon Phoenix bloodline in his body continued to circulate. The Dragon Phoenix ancient armor and the King Kong glass body were once again displayed. Even so, Xiao Yan still did not have enough strength to resist the heavy spirit region. In the sky, the endless number of fire pillars had already been continuously pressed down by the enormous hand. It was likely that Xiao Yan would soon become its next prey. Ha! A cry was emitted from his throat with great difficulty. The heavenly flame within Xiao Yan's body suddenly swept over his entire body. Immediately, it shrank into the middle of the vortex within Xiao Yan's body and transformed into the appearance of an old man. The old man's face was ruddy. His long hair of various colors was the most eye-catching. His long hair was actually divided into 21 different colors. The appearance of this old man was that of the Tu-Shi ancient god. However, this old man was merely formed from the Emperor Flame at this moment. He was not the true Tu-Shi ancient god. A brilliant flame glow suddenly shot out from deep within Xiao Yan's eyes the moment the old man returned to his position. The veins on his forehead swiftly protruded. His strong body once again grew by a couple of feet. His entire body shook as an explosive roar was emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth towards the sky. Heavenly Flame Merge. Extermination Fire Body. Activate. His voice had just sounded when the Tu-Shi ancient god's tightly shut eyes within Xiao Yan's body suddenly opened. A vast and mighty glow rose to the sky. In an instant, it completely merged with Xiao Yan. In an instant, Xiao Yan's body, which had grown by 1,000 feet from the King Kong glass body, once again swelled. A wave of frightening flame strength suddenly swept out from deep within Xiao Yan's body, causing this enormous body of Xiao Yan to instantly transform into a completely flaming person. The heavenly flame that incinerated the sky continued to sweep out from within Xiao Yan's body. The flame domain that was agglomerated from the heavenly flame suddenly emitted a bang sound. The heavy spirit region, which had shrunk by a couple of times, emitted a bang sound as it was forcefully blasted apart. The flame domain that emitted a high temperature instantly swept apart like floodwater. Roar! Fallen Heart Flame. Purifying Demonic Lotus Flame. Burn for me! A rolling thunder-like roar was emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth, causing the entire place to tremble unceasingly. Xiao Yan's entire body shook. His right hand was suddenly waved. Immediately, he clenched it with great force. The heavenly flame flowed out from between the gaps of Xiao Yan's fist like flowing water. Immediately, Xiao Yan's right arm once again shook. His foot suddenly stomped on the empty air. Endless heavenly flame shot out from under Xiao Yan's feet, entering deep into the ground and disappearing. Xiao Yan's enormous body borrowed the force and suddenly charged toward the enormous palm. In merely an instant, he had already arrived under this enormous palm. Xiao Yan's fist was thrown out. A frightening fist wind was wrapped around a frightening heavenly flame that could incinerate the empty air. It suddenly smashed into the enormous palm. The purifying demonic lotus flame and the fallen heart flame that wrapped around Xiao Yan's body instantly and easily refined the black fog around him. However, Xiao Yan's movements did not stop. His fist had yet to land when another punch was already thrown out. It violently smashed into the enormous palm that blotted out the sun. The frightening aura caused the entire sky to tremble repeatedly. It had the momentum to break the sky. Roar! Angry Buddha Lotus Flame. Agglomerate. Xiao Yan's right hand suddenly waved. Immediately, he clenched it across the air. When he opened it once again, a three-colored fire lotus the size of a soccer ball had already appeared in Xiao Yan's palm. Without any hesitation, Xiao Yan's palm was violently thrown out. The places where the palm wind passed were completely refined by the fallen heart flame and the purifying demonic lotus flame. Even when Xiao Yan sent the angry Buddha lotus flame into his palm, he did not pause even a little. Roar! Xiao Yan's body flashed and he explosively withdrew by 100 steps. Suddenly, he let out a long roar towards the sky. The strength of the heavenly flame instantly covered the sky. After the long roar, the entire place was immediately wrapped by a wild and violent suction force. The endless black fog was completely swallowed by Xiao Yan into his body. Even a portion of the enormous palm that reached the sky was swallowed and refined by Xiao Yan. The third Hall Master's face was indifferent in the face of all of this. He naturally knew that it was impossible to rely on this palm to subdue Xiao Yan. However, this was not his aim. Hence, he would naturally not stop Xiao Yan from doing whatever he wanted. What he wanted now was for Xiao Yan to exhaust himself. After all, even he did not have the confidence to completely defeat a powerful Xiao Yan. However, the thing that caused the third Hall Master to be surprised was that this was the first time that he had seen this kind of secret technique that Xiao Yan was using. It was even able to forcefully raise the strength of a bandy expert by so much. This kind of secret technique could be said to be terrifying. Although the third Hall Master was tempted, he was not stupid. He could naturally tell that it was impossible to use this kind of secret technique without the support of many heavenly flames. Roar! A moment later, the originally deep and dark light on the enormous palm that blotted out the sun under the third Hall Master's feet had already become extremely dim. It was likely that the energy within it had already been completely swallowed and refined by Xiao Yan. Grade 8 Collapse. With an explosive cry, Xiao Yan's body shook in the air. His foot once again violently stomped on the empty air. His body flashed and completely shattered the enormous palm, turning it into light spots that permeated the sky. Soon after, Xiao Yan's fist directly struck the third Hall Master's face, intending to kill the third Hall Master in one blow. At this moment, Xiao Yan was completely aware that the time that he could maintain the extermination fire body was almost up. If he was unable to quickly finish off the third Hall Master during this period of time, it was likely that he would leave behind quite a lot of trouble in the future. Xiao Yan's fist pierced through the empty air. Even though he was a great distance away, the blazing wind still caused the third Hall Master to feel a fiery heat all over his body. With regards to this, the third Hall Master naturally did not dare to underestimate it. Fortunately, he had a card up his sleeve and was not the slightest bit afraid of Xiao Yan's unstoppable attack. Just as Xiao Yan was within 100 feet of the third Hall Master, a ruthless expression suddenly flashed across the third Hall Master's eyes. He violently stomped on the empty air and an extremely frightening gravity suddenly pressed down on Xiao Yan's head. At the same time, a deep and dark light flashed under Xiao Yan's feet, causing Xiao Yan's charging body to suddenly be fixed in the empty air, unable to move even a little. The strength of that pressure caused Xiao Yan's frightening extermination fire body to be completely absorbed into his body in less than an instant. His enormous body also instantly returned to its original form. The clothes on Xiao Yan's body were completely shattered. The long robe on his upper body had long since disappeared. His white body was even more eye-catching in this darkness. This was especially the case when there was a hollow green-colored jade pendant in front of Xiao Yan's chest. That was a gift that Lian Er had given Xiao Yan before he left Qingyang City. She said that it was the only thing her grandmother had left for her. Old ghost, you do. If you don't act now, when will you? The third Hall Master also suddenly let out an explosive roar at this moment. It was not difficult to hear that even the third Hall Master was anxious within his voice. From the looks of it, he was not as relaxed as he appeared to be earlier when he forcefully suppressed Xiao Yan. When Old Ghost You Do heard this, a glint instantly flashed deep within his eyes. His body flashed and he had already appeared between Xiao Yan and the third Hall Master. His somewhat illusory body made You Do appear even weaker at this moment. However, his eyes were still flickering with an excited glow. Yudu's heart was naturally extremely excited to be able to recover his physical body and destroy Xiao Yan to take revenge for his physical body. The corners of old ghost Yudu's mouth involuntarily revealed a cruel smile as he stood in front of Xiao Yan. Immediately, his eyes swept over and paused for a moment before they were fixed on the jade pendant. In an instant, Yudu's eyes suddenly widened. An expression of disbelief flashed deep within his pupils. It was a long while later before Yudu's eyes shifted away from the jade pendant with great difficulty. He looked at Xiao Yan and cried out sternly. "Tell me where that girl is and I guarantee that I will leave you with a wisp of your soul." Flowing Time's comment. As a writer, Flowing Time is very apologetic. Due to my lack of experience, there are still many mistakes in the planning of the chapters. Perhaps I haven't even thought about the later parts of the novel. This is indeed a long-term goal, but I've forgotten about the recent events. I'm really sorry. Flowing Time is always planning for the various characters in the future. Perhaps I haven't thought it through for a long time, but I still can't help but think about the later parts of the plot. This book may not have much novelty because there was no overly difficult hurdle set for the main character during the writing process. However, this point will be changed as much as possible in the next volume. There will be more difficult hurdles. Life and death may not be something that I am willing to see, but time will do its best to show it. After all, the road of life is not an asphalt road and it is not so smooth. Xiao Yan should have a moment of life and death. This is what I, as the author, believe. Of course, everyone knows what the ending will be. This path belongs to Xiao Yan and this scene is also prepared for Xiao Yan. However, there are many main characters. Sometimes, whether to remove some of the main characters is a big problem in Time's heart. If you remove some of them, many people will think that this is not in line with Xiao Yan's strength. This is because as long as Xiao Yan has the slightest bit of hope, his friends will definitely not die. However, if you don't remove them, then the entire book will feel very cliché. In the end, everyone who has a good relationship with Xiao Yan will be fine. Therefore, this is a very difficult point. In addition, there is a main character that I have chosen before. She is Xiao Yan's confidant. Deep in my heart, I don't want anything to happen to her. However, for the sake of the sad atmosphere, I want her to suffer for once. This person is our nation's little sister, the little fairy doctor. Of course, if you are unwilling, please state it in the book review and comment section. Time will also remove it. I only hope that everyone will like it. Chapter 93. Tell me where that girl is and I guarantee that I will leave you with a wisp of your soul. Old Ghost Yudu's eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan. An endless amount of greed was revealed in his eyes. His expression appeared somewhat ferocious. His originally distorted face caused one to feel even more terrified at this moment. Xiao Yan could not help but frown when he heard Yudu's words. He thought to himself, is this old ghost Yudu asking me about Lien? Could it be that Lien Er's woeful poison body is related to the Crossing Disaster sect? The change in expression on Xiao Yan's face was naturally captured by the astute old ghost Yudu when he saw Xiao Yan's expression. He was even more certain that Xiao Yan, who was in front of him, knew the whereabouts of the little girl he had been searching for all this while. A cold smile involuntarily flashed across the corners of Yudu's mouth. It looked extremely strange and sinister. After which, he slowly lifted his slightly transparent palm and suddenly waved it. His palm turned into a claw and stood upright in front of Xiao Yan. His 5 shriveled yet incomparably sharp fingers caused tiny cracks to involuntarily appear on Xiao Yan's face. Drops of bright red blood spread out. In the withered wind, Xiao Yan looked like an assassin who had walked through a sea of blood. His entire body was filled with a vicious aura. Upon seeing this scene, the third hallmaster, who was standing behind old Ghost Yudu, could not help but frown. What old Ghost Yudu had said earlier naturally fell into the third hallmaster's ears. However, the third hallmaster did not have any impression of the little girl that old Ghost Yudu had mentioned. One must know that ever since Xiao Yan came to the Yuanwu continent, he had been constantly being pursued by the third hallmaster and the others. If there was such an eye-catching little girl by his side, they would definitely know. However, the scene today caused him to repeatedly ponder. He did not expect that old Ghost Yudu was still hiding something from him and even wanted to secretly scheme against him. This person really had unfathomable motives. However, after the third hallmaster noticed the rich greed in old Ghost Yudu's eyes, his doubtful expression immediately changed as though he had thought of something. A strange look involuntarily flashed across his eyes as he looked at Xiao Yan. Hee, how is it? As long as you tell this old man where that little girl is now, this old man will leave behind a wisp of essence spirit for you today. The misunderstanding between the two of us today will also end here. I will walk my own path, and you will walk your own path. In the future, we will have nothing to do with each other. Xiao Yan's heart involuntarily trembled a little as he sensed the unprecedented dangerous aura in front of him. He would naturally not reveal the matter regarding Lian. The fact that Xiao Yan was able to grow to such an extent meant that his experience was comparable to some genuine old demons. In Xiao Yan's eyes, the words from old Ghost Yudu's mouth were already filled with loopholes. Leaving behind a strand of his soul was no different from directly erasing him. At most, it would only allow him to struggle in this world for a while longer. This fellow would definitely not give him the slightest chance of survival. Perhaps old Ghost Yudu's actions were even more vicious than directly killing him. With Xiao Yan's personality, how could he possibly submit to such things? He would rather be a heroic spirit than a coward. In the face of a great calamity, he did not fear death. This was the real reason why Xiao Yan was able to grow to such an extent. With this thought in mind, a heroic spirit rose in Xiao Yan's heart. The aura in his eyes solidified, and a glint flashed across them. The gaze with which he looked at old Ghost Yudu became increasingly sharp. His eyes flashed, and the crack at the corner of his eyes caused the corners of Xiao Yan's eyes to involuntarily tremble. Although this scene was not considered eye-catching, it was still reflected in old Ghost Yudu's eyes. Immediately, old Ghost Yudu released a cold laugh in his heart. As expected, the stronger one is, the more one fears death. TSK. As long as Xiao Yan's life falls into this old man's hands today, I will see if you will obediently explain yourself. This is a thought passed through old Ghost Yudu's mind, and the vigorous spiritual strength in his body once again gathered between his fingers. His originally sharp aura soared once again. This time, Xiao Yan's facial features became a little distorted under this force. TSK. Flame Emperor Xiao Yan, I wonder if you have thought it through? As long as you can tell me where that little girl is now, I will guarantee that your soul will not be destroyed today. I will allow you to regain your physical body. Old Ghost Yudu's eyes suddenly became sharp. He waved his hand, and the space in front of Xiao Yan instantly collapsed. The pitch-black and deep endless void gave one a chilling feeling of being devoured. It was as though once one entered, one would never be able to come out alive. Xiao Yan's expression involuntarily changed when he saw this. At this moment, he was being suppressed by the third Hallmaster's full strength, and the might of the heavy spirit region poured out in torrents. Even Xiao Yan would have difficulty turning the situation around at this moment. If old Ghost Yudu really attacked him, it was likely that he would really take a step into the door of life and death today. Old Ghost Yudu was quite satisfied with the change in Xiao Yan's expression. What he wanted to see was the frightened expression on Xiao Yan's face. As long as this was the case, he would feel even more comfortable teasing Xiao Yan. He wanted Xiao Yan to lose all the dignity that belonged to a half-emperor expert. Xiao Yan's heart gradually calmed down in response to this. It seemed that old Ghost Yudu only wanted to toy with him. However, how could Xiao Yan be manipulated by others? His expression immediately changed, and he coldly smiled at old Ghost Yudu. He laughed. Looks like you don't really dare to kill me. Old Ghost Yudu's expression changed slightly, and he coldly snorted. His shriveled hand grabbed Xiao Yan's neck, and he suddenly tightened his grip. Xiao Yan's face was already flushed red from suffocation, but his expression when he looked at old Ghost Yudu still did not show the slightest bit of fear. Humph! With a cold snort, old Ghost Yudu loosened his grip and removed it from Xiao Yan's neck. Immediately he coldly said, "You are really bold. You actually dare to use this to provoke this old man." Xiao Yan smiled when he heard this. He coughed and panted for a while, and his flushed face gradually faded. He ignored old Ghost Yudu's cold words, and his eyes stared straight at old Ghost Yudu. He coldly laughed and said, "Since you want to obtain something from me, I can naturally ask you to do something for me. Don't you think so?" Old Ghost Yudu narrowed his eyes. He naturally understood why Xiao Yan said these words. At this moment, he was under the control of the heavy spirit region. The reason why he said these words was because he wanted him to attack the third Hallmaster behind him. When the third Hallmaster heard Xiao Yan's words, he could not help but be slightly shocked. The expression on his face also became ugly. Did this old ghost you do really dare to attack him? Old ghost you do. This Xiao Yan is a great enemy of both of us. At this moment, the old me has restrained him with great difficulty. If you were to change your mind at this moment, forget about the old me. It is likely that the both of us will lose our old lives here today. At this critical moment, the third hallmaster could not help but shout at old ghost you do, hoping that he would be able to attack Xiao Yan first. After all, he did not wish for his plan to kill two birds with one stone to be destroyed by Xiao Yan. When old ghost you do heard the third hallmaster's words, his heart moved slightly. He had personally experienced Xiao Yan's fighting strength. Forget about the current him, even if Xiao Yan was at his peak with the protection of the heavenly flame, he would definitely not be a match for him. Now, he naturally did not want to let go of such a good opportunity. However, the jade pendant on Xiao Yan's chest was truly tempting him. Others might not know about that little girl, but he was someone who came from the Du-Yi sect. How could he not know? That little girl would allow him to become a truly powerful person. At that time, forget about the Du-Yi sect. It was likely that even the strongest faction would have to think twice before facing him. One side was life, and the other side was strength. One could not have both the fish and the bear's paw. Today he could only choose one. Old ghost you do narrowed his eyes into a line as he looked at Xiao Yan. Immediately, he glanced at the third hall master from the corner of his eyes. If either of these two people were to survive, they would definitely be a great threat to him. If he wanted to live, then the two people beside him must die today. A ruthless look flashed across the depths of his eyes. Two powerful half-martial emperors actually wanted him, a seriously injured person, to judge their life and death. To him, this was a kind of opportunity. One cannot have both the fish and the bear's paw? TSK 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 TSK. Today, this old man wants to see if this old man can have both. Old ghost you do glanced at Xiao Yan with a pitiful expression. After which, he used the corner of his eyes to stare at the third hall master behind him. Old ghost you do licked his dry lips in a bloodthirsty manner and sneered at Xiao Yan. Flame Emperor Xiao Yan. TSK 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 TSK. I'm sorry, but this old man still chooses to live. After all, without life, what is the use of strength? Before his voice sounded, the expression on Xiao Yan's face had already become solemn. This old ghost you do clearly intended to kill him. When the third hallmaster, who was standing behind old ghost you do, heard these words of old ghost you do, he involuntarily let out a cold laugh in his heart. As long as Xiao Yan was defeated, no one in Yanluo City would be able to fight against him today. On the other side, without waiting for Xiao Yan to make a move, old ghost Yudu's terrifying finger pointed at the spot between Xiao Yan's brows. At the same time, a somewhat hoarse cry was emitted from old ghost Yudu's mouth. Poison finger. As old ghost Yudu cried out, a shriveled palm suddenly smashed towards the third hallmaster's chest behind him. This seemingly ordinary palm caused the entire world to shake the moment it was unleashed. In an instant, the empty space shattered, and the area within a 100-mile radius around the three of them was turned into nothingness. A half-martial emperor was indeed extremely powerful. Even though his body was seriously injured, he was still able to attract the might of the world. He was indeed worthy of being called a true peak expert in the continent. The third hallmaster's expression had already turned into one of shock the moment the palm struck. He did not expect old ghost Yudu to actually dare to attack him. However, the opportunity had already passed, and it was already too late for him to do anything. Additionally, with the control of the heavy spirit region, it was even more impossible for him to dodge. Hence, he could only stand and watch the attack arrive. In merely an instant, old ghost Yudu's towering finger had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan. The strong and ferocious wind caused Xiao Yan's long hair to dance continuously. Xiao Yan also involuntarily shut his eyes, as though he was waiting for the moment of death to arrive. Is this really the only way? Ancestor Xiao Xian, Sun Er, Kai Lin. I never expected that I will have to completely leave all of you so soon after arriving in this strange world. At this moment, a bitterness involuntarily surged into Xiao Yan's heart. The reluctance to part with Sun Er and Kai Lin in his heart was indescribable. Additionally, he felt guilt toward Xiao Xian. Bang! An explosive sound appeared. Two figures flew out from the pitch-black darkness in the sky. Soon after, they heavily smashed into the endless abyss, and their figures disappeared. End of chapter. I have left something at the end to let everyone guess what exactly happened. Will old ghost Udo's plan of getting both the fish and the bear's paw work? Additionally, please collect it. Chapter 94. Above the horizon, in the endless void, two figures flew out with a loud bang. They crossed each other in mid-air and then plunged into the vast and endless abyss. Their figures disappeared in a flash. In the void, a circle of white flame ripples spread out. Everywhere it passed, even the endless void could not help but tremble. This was enough to show how powerful it was. A young man covered in wounds stood in the middle of the flame ripple. Fresh blood covered his body as he stood in the empty space in a daze. The expression on his face was a little dull because of this sudden unexpected change. Only after a dozen breaths later did the eyes of the man suddenly emit a bright glow of having survived a calamity. Old Gu, you have intervened. However, didn't you say? This man was surprisingly Xiao Yan, who was about to be struck by old ghost Udo's poisoned centipede finger earlier. If that finger had struck, Xiao Yan's soul would have been destroyed and he would have completely disappeared from this world. However, from the looks of it, it seemed that Gu Yu had saved him. Before Xiao Yan could speak, Gu Yu took over. He curled his lips and snorted softly. His tone was strange as he spoke. Brat, don't be so happy. This old me is not in the mood to save you. However, this old me finds that little brat from earlier an eyesore. Hence, I intervened to teach him a lesson. However, the body of a bandit is not even comparable to an ant in front of this old me. You actually dare to speak such arrogant words and look down on my heavenly flame body. Humph humph. Do you really think that this old me is made of mud? Xiao Yan felt warmth in his heart upon hearing this. Although Gu Yu had said this, he would not have intervened in such a dangerous situation if he had not wanted to save Xiao Yan. These words were merely an excuse for himself. Old Gu, thank you very much. The corners of Xiao Yan's mouth lifted into a warm smile. He thanked Gu Yu in his heart, but he was fooled by Gu Yu's soft snort. Xiao Yan smiled and did not say anything else. Instead, he turned his eyes to the endless abyss below him. Although Gu Yu's attack was powerful, his objective was not to kill old ghost Udo instead, it was to send him flying. After all, he would definitely not disobey the orders of the Tushi ancient god, even though he had already violated the orders of the Tushi ancient god. With Gu Yu's powerful attack, the heavy spirit region, which had been ruthlessly suppressing Xiao Yan, was broken by the bone-chilling flame. In front of Gu Yu's strength, the heavy spirit region, which Xiao Yan found extremely troublesome, was merely a toy that could be destroyed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the figures of old ghost Udo and the third hall master were suspended in the ink-black void with great difficulty under the endless abyss. Old ghost Udo's body, which was continuously turning illusory, appeared as though it did not exist after being struck by Gu Yu's blazing bone-chilling flame. If it was not for the layer of dim fluorescent light on the surface of his body and the endless darkness, it was likely that one would not be able to see his body. Although the third hall master's condition was a little better compared to old ghost Udo, it was clearly not much better. His black robes had already been turned into nothingness by the bone-chilling flame. The dense black fog lingering around his body had also become dark at this moment. It was possible to vaguely see a skinny corpse-like body within it. The strange mask that covered his face had also disappeared, revealing a bone-like face. A pair of shady old eyes seemed to be embedded in the depths of his eye sockets, and his bony face looked as if only a piece of skull was left. Just what was that earlier? Did Xiao Yan's heavenly flame erupt? Or did he use that Buddha's fiery lotus? The shady old eyes of the third hall master appeared to have been shut. Both of his eyes stared intently at the empty space in front of him. The monstrous fury in his heart caused the space itself to become a little distorted. The third hall master's shriveled hand rubbed the corner of his chin. There was a deep wound at that spot, so deep that one could see his bone. However, the third hall master did his best to suppress it. Old ghost Udo, you old thing who will not die. You are really tired of living. You actually dared to scheme against the old me. You have caused the old me to end up in such a state. Humph. Today, the old me will definitely capture the both of you even if I have to use everything I have. Old ghost Udo, today, the old me will allow you to witness the tactics of my ghost temple gate. In the sky, Xiao Yan's tensed body lasted for a full 15 minutes. Finally, his entire body softened and he sat down in the empty space. His mouth continued to pant coarsely. The tight muscles all over his body suddenly relaxed. Sweat gushed out from the pores all over his body like a fountain, causing the wounds all over Xiao Yan's body to erupt. Waves of heart-piercing pain caused Xiao Yan to involuntarily suck in a breath of cool air. After swiftly consuming a few grade 9 energy recovery pills, Xiao Yan's body sat cross-legged in the empty space. The flame art chi method in his body rapidly circulated. In an instant, the entire sky changed color. The natural energy appeared from the empty space and covered the sun. It was like a cloud that swept across the entire sky. Above Xiao Yan's head, a tornado that was 1,000 feet wide poured down with a vast natural energy. It was like a meteor waterfall that flowed into Xiao Yan's body. Unfortunately, even with such a monstrous power in the outside world, when the natural energy entered Xiao Yan's body, it was like a small stream of water, utterly inadequate. It was likely that Xiao Yan would not be able to quickly recover within a short period of time. In the endless abyss, old ghost Yudu's face was grave as he looked at the third hallmaster in front of him. His increasingly faint soul made him appear even weaker at this moment. Humph, why? Do you want to deal with the old me? Old ghost Yudu vigilantly watched the third hallmaster. It was a long while later before he let out a cold snort and said in a cold voice. The third hallmaster could not help but curl the corners of his mouth when he heard this. He revealed a cold smile and let out a cold snort. His eyes stared at old ghost Yudu and sneered. Why? You just launched a sneak attack on the old me and now you want to wash your hands of it and act like nothing happened? Old ghost Yudu laughed coldly when he heard this. He had already expected the third hallmaster to say such a thing. The moment the third hallmaster's words sounded, old ghost Yudu laughed coldly and replied. Since you also have ulterior motives against the old me, it is not impossible for me to give you a warning first. Humph. Warning. What a good warning. Since you want to say that I have ulterior motives against you, I will let you see just what kind of ulterior motives I have for you today. Before his voice sounded, the third hallmaster had already absorbed the black fog that lingered around his body into his body. Immediately after, he put his shriveled hands in front of his chest. His palms moved rapidly and numerous complicated seals were quickly formed. Circles of invisible ripples formed in the space in front of him. When old ghost Yudu saw this, his originally solemn face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. He looked at the third hallmaster as though he had seen the king of hell. He was incomparably terrified. Perhaps other people did not know this move that the third hallmaster was using at this moment, but Yudu was someone who came from a faction in the middle region. He was naturally very clear about this secret technique of a faction in the middle region. The spirit devouring skill was the inner sect chi method of the ghost slaughter sect. Its greatest characteristic was that it could forcefully devour other people's souls and maximize the strength of the original body into one's own body. Although the backlash after using this chi method was extremely great, it was still a last resort. At this moment, the third hallmaster was obviously preparing to forcefully devour old ghost Yudu's soul and add it to his original body to deal with Xiao Yan. In this way, not only would he be able to eliminate old ghost Yudu, but he would also be able to capture Xiao Yan. It would be killing two birds with one stone. Even if he ended up being seriously injured, as long as he could bring Xiao Yan back, the third hallmaster was certain that not only would his strength recover, but his strength and status would also rise in the sect. Therefore, how could he not give it his all? Have you really gone mad? You actually dare to use such a chi method that destroys your essence for the sake of Xiao Yan. Are you really seeking death? At this moment, old ghost Yudu's heart had become abnormally terrified. The third hallmaster was obviously not trying to scare him. If he was allowed to continue, his old life would really end here today. Old ghost Yudu clenched his teeth. A ferocious expression was revealed on his face. Both of his hands were swiftly lifted and he stood in front of the third hallmaster. A thought passed through his heart and numerous seals were swiftly formed. When the seals in old ghost Yudu's hands changed, the spiritual strength all over old ghost Yudu's body was absorbed into his body and swiftly agglomerated. A moment later, it transformed into a bright bead the size of an egg. This bead was old ghost Yudu's spiritual essence. The heart of the third hallmaster involuntarily tightened when he saw this scene. Old ghost Yudu was clearly intending to use the self-destruction of his soul to drag him into the abyss. Humph! If you want to die, you want to bring the old me along. How ruthless! However, in front of the spirit-devouring art of the old me, you can only dream. Before his voice sounded, the hand movements of the third hallmaster suddenly increased. The dou qi in his body was like a flowing river as it poured out. In merely a couple of breaths, the seals in the hands of the third hall master had entered the final stage. His hand movements did not stop. The third hall master lifted his hand and his sharp fingernail was like a blade as it cut across his brow. A bloody scar appeared as a drop of blood from his brow dripped onto the tip of the third hall master's finger. Blood seal, agglomerate. A stern cry sounded as the bloody finger of the third hall master swiftly drew in the air in front of him. An extremely strange blood seal was swiftly formed. Without any hesitation, the third hall master threw a palm forward. The blood seal also imprinted itself into old Ghost Yudu's chest at that instant. Suddenly, a bright red glaring blood light shot from old Ghost Yudu's body to the sky. The spiritual essence that was swiftly forming within old Ghost Yudu's body also instantly froze at this moment. The expression of old Ghost Yudu had already turned deathly pale the moment the blood seal appeared. Even the spirit would be afraid when the blood seal appeared. This was the impression that the people of the Yuanwu continent had of the blood seal. In front of the blood seal, unless one's spiritual strength far exceeded the other parties, one would only end up being suppressed. The blood seal of the ghost obliterating sect had never failed before. TSK 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 TSK, you will not be able to escape death today. Spirit devouring art, devouring the heavens and spirit. With an explosive cry, the space in front of the third hall master suddenly exploded. Pitch-black fog swept out in all directions, instantly wrapping old Ghost Yudu's spirit and beginning to refine it. At the same time, 10,000 miles away, two figures, one old and one young, were rapidly rushing towards the savage ancient city. From the looks of it, it was no different from fleeing for their lives. Suddenly, the old man's body abruptly paused as he stood in the air, his face instantly filled with astonishment. Elder Yu. Don't say anything else, quickly leave. I can't hold on for much longer. Quickly leave this place and find a baby boy for me. Quickly. Before his voice faded, the old man had already grabbed the young man and fled into the distance. The old man and the young man were Su Zhan and his great-grandfather. After witnessing Xiao Yan's power, Su Zhan's great-grandfather had quickly fled Yanluo City with him. As for the other members of the Su clan, they had died in the city due to their serious injuries. Now, only Su Zhan and his great-grandfather were left in the huge Su clan. All of this had happened in a single day. A day ago, they were living like true sacred emperors. In a single day, they had been destroyed. The affairs of the world were unpredictable. It was truly pitiful and lamentable. Chapter 95. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. A wild and violent storm swept in all directions in the distant sky. Waves of pure natural energy gathered from a tornado that seemed to reach the sky. The dense and heavy natural energy transformed into a large amount of extremely pure energy liquid at this moment and poured into the body of the human figure below the tornado. This vast scene continued for a full 2 hours before the man below the tornado suddenly opened his eyes. He looked down at the endless dark abyss. At this moment, there was an extremely frightening aura continuously gathering and rising. That might shook the heavens. A deep solemnness surfaced on Xiao Yan's somewhat pale face at this moment. He had yet to recover at this moment, but something had clearly happened to the third hall master duo that caused their auras to become so frightening. If they were to fight at this moment, it was likely that Xiao Yan would have difficulty winning. Currently, this aura was becoming increasingly powerful. It was likely too late for Xiao Yan to withdraw, even if he wanted to. Since there was no way to retreat, the only method now was to forcefully fight with these two people. With this thought in his mind, Xiao Yan also slowly stopped circulating the flame art chi method in his body. The aura of his entire body suddenly shook. His body flashed and once again stood in the empty space. He adjusted his condition to the best possible state and quietly waited for the appearance of the two people below. Bang! An explosive bang was emitted from the endless deep abyss below Xiao Yan. The originally incomparably deep empty space once again shattered with a bang under this sound. Immediately, Xiao Yan saw a 1,000-foot-wide dark black dou qi light pillar pass through the restraints of space in an instant and arrive in front of Xiao Yan. An attack suddenly smashed towards Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's expression was involuntarily startled. It was likely that even the third hall master at his peak condition would not be able to unleash such a swift and violent attack. What exactly happened? From the looks of it, that old Ghost Yudu should have yet to come out. However, why is the third hall master's aura so powerful? This thought swiftly flashed across Xiao Yan's heart. However, He no longer had the mood to bother about these things. The attack in front of him had already arrived in front of him. It was merely 10 feet away from Xiao Yan. Sky Absolute Step. Open. In a moment of desperation, the Do Chi within Xiao Yan's body wildly swept out. His feet moved and the Sky Absolute Step was instantly unleashed to its limit. Without any sound, the empty space around Xiao Yan's body instantly collapsed. Xiao Yan's body also instantly disappeared, leaving behind a substance-like afterimage. Before that afterimage could disappear, that earth-shaking attack suddenly struck across the sky. Everywhere it passed, everything turned into a deathly silent void. It caused one to feel a wave of terror surge into one's heart, something that was difficult to erase. TSK 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 TSK. Xiao Yan, today, you will definitely belong to the old me. The old me also advises you to seal your own cultivation as soon as possible and make a trip with the old me. That way you can avoid suffering this physical pain. Xiao Yan's body had just appeared in the sky. He had yet to move when the third Hallmaster's figure, which was wrapped in a black fog, had already appeared a couple of dozen feet in front of him. He faced Xiao Yan from a distance and smiled as he looked at the solemn-faced Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan also instantly saw the third Hallmaster when he raised his eyes. His originally solemn expression instantly became incomparably solemn. At this moment, the third Hallmaster's strength had already far surpassed his previous strength. The strength of his aura had likely already reached the intermediate 8th star half-martial emperor level. His strength had far surpassed Xiao Yan's. In addition to Xiao Yan's current condition, it was likely impossible for him to escape from the third Hallmaster's hands. Fighting with his life on the line was Xiao Yan's only way out at this moment. If his luck was still acceptable, he might still have a chance to survive. Otherwise, he would end up in a situation where he would never be able to recover. In merely an instant, thousands of thoughts flashed across Xiao Yan's mind. A determined expression surged into his eyes as he looked at the third Hallmaster. In today's battle, if the third Hallmaster did not die, then he, the Flame Emperor, would fall. He would definitely go all out in this battle. Humph! Based on your understanding of me, do you think that I will accept my fate? Hearing this, the third Hallmaster could not help but frown slightly. However, soon after, he relaxed his brows. He naturally knew Xiao Yan's temperament very well. In that case, Xiao Yan's words meant that he was going to start the battle. SSK. You are indeed worthy of being called the Flame Emperor Xiao Yan. This courage is really not something that an ordinary person can match. It is likely that only you are able to remain so imposing in this life and death situation. There's no need to say anything more. Although I can see that your aura is that of an 8th star half-martial emperor, there is clearly another tyrannical aura within your body that is still resisting. If I'm not wrong, that aura belongs to that old ghost. You do. In response to the third Hallmaster's endless procrastination, the corners of Xiao Yan's mouth curled up into a cold smile as he coldly said, "Haha, the Flame Emperor is indeed the Flame Emperor. In front of you, our methods are as clear as our understanding of you. There are no secrets at all. Humph, it is only because I have seen too much of it. You damn things always like to steal souls. Tisk tis. There will come a day when you will understand that in the face of great strength, all methods are just a method of survival." Before his voice sounded, the third Hallmaster suddenly flipped his hand across the air. Wild and violent black Do Chi surged and churned like a tidal wave. In an instant, it transformed into a large hand in front of the third Hallmaster. A palm suddenly smashed toward Xiao Yan. The instant this large palm attacked, Xiao Yan's expression had already changed drastically. The space around him had actually been completely sealed the instant the large palm attacked. Dodging this attack was completely a pipe dream. Damn it, looks like I can only face him head-on. Yellow Spring Palm. Not daring to underestimate it, Xiao Yan's mind moved and from the still somewhat empty vortex in his body, waves of extremely pure Do Chi quickly followed the route of the Chi method in Xiao Yan's body and circulated into his palm. With an explosive cry, the Yellow Spring Palm was unleashed by Xiao Yan. It also transformed into a towering flame palm against the wind. The palm violently smashed toward the black heaven ascending palm. TSK. At this moment, there is not much Do Chi left in your body. How can you fight the old me with such a weak palm? Demonic Cloud Palm, break. As the third Hallmaster let out a low cry, the large heaven ascending palm, which had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan, suddenly spread out a circle of dense black fog. It collided with Xiao Yan's yellow spring palm. Crack! A clear sound was emitted from the empty space. The circle of black fog was subsequently broken apart. An even more frightening force shot out and instantly broke Xiao Yan's yellow spring palm with a single blow. Even though this was the case, the force did not diminish as it swiftly blasted toward Xiao Yan. Seeing this scene, the expression on Xiao Yan's face instantly became so solemn that it seemed as though water could be wrung out of it. The aura of Xiao Yan's body suddenly shook. The heavenly flame in his body poured out. He clenched his hand across the air and the endless heavenly flame transformed into a large fire ruler. Without any hesitation, Xiao Yan held the large fire ruler in one hand and pulled it close to him. Both of his hands held the ruler's hilt. Both of his arms suddenly moved and the beautiful large fire ruler swiftly began to circle around Xiao Yan's body. A seemingly substance-like heavenly flame barrier also appeared around Xiao Yan's body, firmly protecting him within. Six-joint body flowing ruler. The moment the six-joint body flowing ruler was displayed, the strong and ferocious force also violently smashed onto the heavenly flame barrier. Bang! With a loud bang, Xiao Yan's body, which was standing horizontally in the empty space, involuntarily flew back by 10,000 feet. Only then did he stabilize his body with great difficulty. Even his arm, which was holding the large ruler, felt a bone-breaking pain. Xiao Yan clenched his teeth tightly. His eyes stared intently at the large palm that was smashing toward him. The dou qi in his body suddenly poured out, forcefully suppressing the pain on both of his arms. His hand, which was holding the large ruler, once again waved it. The large ruler stood horizontally beside Xiao Yan. The dou qi in his body surged out from his palm and covered the entire large ruler, causing it to appear incomparably gorgeous. Flame. Devouring. Wave. Ruler. Xiao Yan suddenly let out an explosive cry toward the sky. His hand, which was holding the large ruler, suddenly exerted force and swept it horizontally toward the large palm. 1,000-foot-wide heavenly flame wave carried a frightening monstrous might as it violently smashed toward the large palm. Bang! An earth-shaking explosion suddenly swept apart from the two dou skills. Soon after, a monstrous wave that carried a vast heavenly might swept in all directions. The bodies of Xiao Yan and the third Hall Master were sent flying by this huge wave over 500 kilometers. Xiao Yan's body was forcefully stopped in the air. That powerful strength caused the injuries that Xiao Yan had been suppressing earlier to suddenly erupt at this moment. A large mouthful of blood. Only at this moment were the two of them able to clearly see just how great the strength of these two dou skills was after they exploded. The frightening explosion caused a mushroom cloud, which was like an ancient tree that covered the sky, to rise from the middle. Under this mushroom cloud, this entire world was completely covered within it. Due to the presence of the heavenly flame, this mushroom cloud appeared to be half a blazing flame while the other half was a darkness that could swallow the empty space. Xiao Yan's heart once again tightened when he saw this. His all-out attack was only able to break this large palm. If this were to continue, it was likely that he would really die here today. Xiao Yan's body flashed. He unleashed the Sky Absolute Step with all his might. The little dou qi in his body was also completely squeezed out. His body swiftly flashed as he held the large ruler with both hands and suddenly smashed it toward the third Hall Master with all his might. Given the third Hall Master's current peak condition, every action of Xiao Yan's was basically seen by him. It was impossible for Xiao Yan to forcefully collide with him. However, when the third Hall Master saw Xiao Yan's crazy expression, a mocking expression surged deep within his eyes. Ha! Xiao Yan completely ignored the feeling of exhaustion in his body. The giddiness that was transmitted from his mind was also forcefully suppressed by him as he wildly smashed toward the third Hall Master without any regard for his life. Humph! The third Hall Master let out a cold snort. His eyes stared at Xiao Yan, completely ignoring the large fire ruler that was flying toward him. The third Hall Master waited until the large ruler was in front of his face and the searing hot aura invaded his body before he suddenly turned his body. The large ruler pressed close to the third Hall Master's chest as it smashed down. A feeling of danger immediately surged into Xiao Yan's heart when he saw this scene. However, the action of his hand was clearly not something that he could control at this moment. The third Hall Master also used this opportunity to ruthlessly slap his palm forward and violently strike Xiao Yan's chest. A chi sound was mixed with a few clear sounds of bones breaking. Xiao Yan bent his body and spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood. His body flew backwards uncontrollably. The third hallmaster clearly did not want to let Xiao Yan off so easily. Before Xiao Yan could stop his body, the third hallmaster's figure once again appeared behind Xiao Yan. Another palm ruthlessly met with Xiao Yan's body that was flying backwards. Bang! With a bang sound, Xiao Yan's body once again turned around and continued to fly forward. He was like a football that continuously flew forward. Fresh blood was also freely spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth. At this moment, Xiao Yan was truly like a lamp that had run out of oil. He could only be mercilessly toyed with by the third hall master. Bang! With another bang sound, Xiao Yan's body flew backwards by 10,000 feet. This time, the third hall master did not chase after him. After all, from the third hall master's point of view, Xiao Yan was already unable to escape from his palm. Since he had played enough, there was no need to continue. If Xiao Yan died, he would really be unable to answer to his superiors. Xiao Yan also stabilized his body with great difficulty. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness as he looked at the third hall master. However, under this ruthlessness, there was also some helplessness. At this point, I'm afraid that I can't care so much. Although I don't know if it will be effective, I can only try my best. Xiao Yan forcefully endured the pain and weakness brought about by the serious injuries on his body. He clenched his teeth tightly, emitting waves of creaking sounds. Fresh blood continuously flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His palms, which were also stained with blood, slowly gathered strength. After a few breaths, he suddenly clenched his palms. The pain in his body seemed to have disappeared in an instant. His aura suddenly fluctuated. His hands were held in front of his chest. His fingers swiftly moved, and mysterious symbols were formed one after another. With a thought, the light in Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly shook. Following this, he let out an explosive cry in his heart. Clan Tattoo appear. Chapter 96. Ha! Clan Tattoo, appear. An explosive cry was emitted from Xiao Yan's heart. The Do Di bloodline within his body, which had been silent for 10 years, had finally erupted today. The mysterious ancient clan tattoo once again surfaced between Xiao Yan's brows. It merged with the fire seal, causing it to appear unusually mysterious. A majestic aura that was filled with an ancient aura spread from Xiao Yan's body the moment the clan tattoo appeared, causing the boundless sky to tremble. The ancient aura was really terrifying. Even until now, it still caused the world to be extremely shocked. From this, one could imagine just how powerful the ancient humans were. The purple-gold Do Di bloodline swiftly swelled within the blood vessels within Xiao Yan's body. Wave after wave of powerful and pure energy spluttered out and galloped within Xiao Yan's body. The purple-gold Do Di bloodline within Xiao Yan's blood vessels agglomerated into a purple-gold blood dragon in an instant. The blood dragon swiftly moved through Xiao Yan's blood vessels. Wherever it passed, a purple-gold brilliant light would scatter. This light passed through Xiao Yan's blood vessels and merged into the damaged internal organs and bones within Xiao Yan's body. In merely a couple of breaths, the bones and organs that had been injured by the third hallmaster had clearly recovered. The aura of the blood dragon exploded. Its body flashed and it actually arrived within the vortex within Xiao Yan's body. As the blood dragon swiftly circled, it also caused the vortex within Xiao Yan's body to involuntarily circulate. The flame art chi method was also circulating at a frightening speed that it had never experienced before. In the outside world, the expression on Xiao Yan's face changed slightly. His eyes swept over the natural energy that had become as turbulent as the waves of the deep sea due to the activation of the Do Di bloodline within his body. Surprise involuntarily flashed across the depths of his eyes. The Do Di bloodline was actually this powerful. Even with Xiao Yan's current strength, he was actually able to create such a vast aura. It was no wonder that the 8 ancient clans placed such importance on the strength of the bloodline. The bloodline of a Do Di was really this frightening. A thought passed through his mind and the heavenly flame within his body instantly swept out, completely wrapping Xiao Yan within it. The natural energy was also completely absorbed into the vortex within Xiao Yan's body under the frightening refinement of the heavenly flame. In merely a moment, the empty vortex within Xiao Yan's body was once again replaced by an extremely pure Do Qi. At this moment, Xiao Yan's strength had already reached the level of a 4-star half-martial emperor. However, even with this being the case, Xiao Yan's aura was still rapidly rising. As his aura continued to rise, it told Xiao Yan that the end of this aura was far from here. While Xiao Yan was activating the Do Di bloodline within his body, the Saint Blood Crystal, which contained the fate of the entire Xiao clan, suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light at this moment in a glorious large hall tens of thousands of kilometers away. It illuminated the originally bright and beautiful large hall until it appeared like a glass celestial palace. A human figure wrapped in a black robe quietly appeared in front of the Saint Blood Crystal the moment the golden light flickered. A pair of sharp old eyes under the black robe also emitted a surprised glint. This is the bloodline strength within that person's body that has been activated. From the looks of it, that person has likely met a great enemy. The person under the black robe used a somewhat hoarse old voice to mutter to himself. From the sound of his voice, this old man was surprisingly the first elder who had ordered Xiao Mingyuan to leave the clan back then. However, at this moment, the first elder was extremely worried in his heart. The only explanation for activating the bloodline strength for no reason was that this person had met with a great calamity. Helpless, he could only activate the D bloodline within his body to ensure his safety. Humph. Third brother. You have left the clan for such a long time, yet you are still unable to find that person. This time around, you have really gone overboard. A bright golden light was reflected in the first elder's eyes. Both of his eyes stared intently at the Saint Blood Crystal. It was a long while later before he finally opened his mouth and spoke in a somewhat furious voice. Someone come. A low cry was transmitted from within the large hall. However, in an instant, a dark black human figure appeared behind the first elder without any forewarning. He supported himself with one hand on the ground and knelt on one knee. He was silent. Although he was behind the first elder, he appeared to be in front of the first elder. The first elder did not pay much attention to him as he opened his mouth and spoke. Go and find Xiao Mingyuan. Tell him to quickly search for that person. If he cannot find him in the middle region, then go to the southern region. If he cannot find him in the southern region, then search all the regions for me. No matter what, you must find him and bring him back. A furious voice was transmitted, causing the kneeling person's body to involuntarily tremble. In his heart, he knew that the first elder was truly furious this time around. Not daring to be negligent, that person nodded slightly before his body flashed again and swiftly fled the large hall. Within the large hall, the first elder once again stood quietly in the same spot. After a long while, his body gradually became illusory and quietly disappeared from the large hall. The third hall master stared intently at Xiao Yan. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Xiao Yan's method at this moment had actually forcefully raised his physical strength by 2 stars. First there was the extermination fire body, and now there was the bloodline strength. If these two were to be activated at the same time, how terrifying would the power be? It was likely that just thinking about it would cause one's entire body to turn cold. In merely a moment, the aura and strength all over Xiao Yan's body had already changed from its previous weak appearance. His entire body's aura was like a rainbow that shot towards the sky. His strength could break through the heavens in an instant. Even when compared to old Ghost Yu Du at his peak condition, he was not inferior. Xiao Yan let out a long roar towards the sky. 1,000 feet wide fire pillar shot out from Xiao Yan's mouth. It penetrated through the empty space and pierced into the endless empty space, causing the space to fluctuate. By the time Xiao Yan turned his head and took a look, the pair of dim eyes from before had already disappeared. At this moment, it was a pair of flaming eyes that were scattered with a dazzling fire light. With a slight turn, the heavenly flame that could soar into the sky flew out from Xiao Yan's flaming eyes and burned the sky. When the third hall master saw this scene, he was extremely shocked. How could he dare to let Xiao Yan continue? His body moved and a thick black fog rippled out from all over his body. In a flash, he had already appeared outside of the heavenly flame around Xiao Yan's body. Humph! False bravado. Today, this old man will definitely bring you back to my sect. Xiao Yan, it's best that you don't try to struggle in vain. Come and take this old man's palm. Sky Demon Palm. The third hall master struck with his palm and a frightening black fog surged out. The Sky Demon Palm that the third hall master had unleashed once again soared with the wind. In an instant, it turned into a large palm that was 1,000 feet in size. It covered the sky as it violently slammed toward Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan used his pair of flaming eyes to sweep over the Sky Demon Palm that was violently slamming toward him. His nose emitted a cold snort. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a cold smile as he said, "False bravado? Humph humph, from the way I see it, you are the one who is false bravado. You are merely a useless person who only has looks. Without waiting for the third hall master to react, Xiao Yan's body turned and the dou qi in his body swiftly surged out. The heavenly flame also instantly spread over Xiao Yan's palm. His palm violently smashed toward the sky demon palm of the third hall master. Yellow spring palm. A palm that was only the size of a human's palm flew out when Xiao Yan's palm struck out. The space instantly collapsed wherever the yellow spring palm passed. A dark, deep, empty space appeared behind the yellow spring palm. The yellow spring palm carried an overwhelming might as it violently smashed toward the sky demon palm of the third hall master. The sky demon palm merely lasted for a couple of breaths when the two collided before it burst apart with a loud bang. Xiao Yan also moved at this moment. His body flashed and appeared in front of the third hall master. His fist violently smashed toward the third hall master's face. Grade 8 smash. The flaming arm that was covered by the heavenly flame passed by with a bang. The third hall master's skinny face also felt a fiery pain. His heart did not dare to underestimate the attack. His body swiftly pulled back as his fist met Xiao Yan's enormous flaming fist. Sky Demon Fist. In an instant, the two fists had already collided. Xiao Yan's body suddenly shook as a powerful force suddenly poured out from his fist and smashed toward the third hall master. The third hall master naturally did not dare to be careless. The dou qi in his body surged out and gathered on his fist. He did his best to block Xiao Yan's powerful and overbearing punch. However, it was still a pity. At this moment, Xiao Yan was at his peak condition and his strength had far surpassed his previous strength. With just the strength of a 3-star half-martial emperor, Xiao Yan was able to fight an intense battle with the third hall master. Currently, Xiao Yan's strength had reached the level of a 5-star half-martial emperor. Even if the third hall master had the strength of an 8-star half-martial emperor, one should not forget that Xiao Yan's physical strength was truly terrifying. The two complemented each other. How could the third hall master contend against Xiao Yan's full strength? Ha! A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Get lost. Grade 8 smash. Explode. Bang! An earth-shaking explosion resounded across this place. At this moment, even this place was no longer able to restrain the two. The battle between the two was no longer something that could be controlled by the world. As the explosion sounded, the third hall master's body fell like a meteorite and once again smashed into the endless abyss. Humph! You want to retreat? Do you really think that you can retreat? A cold snort was emitted from Xiao Yan's nose. His body once again shook abruptly. A beautiful heavenly flame suddenly agglomerated on his back. In an instant, it turned into a pair of beautiful flame wings. The footwork under Xiao Yan's feet changed. His body, which was standing in the empty air, instantly disappeared. At the same time, the third hall chief's swiftly falling body suddenly paused in the air. Soon after, he turned into a human cannonball that shot toward the sky with a bang. However, from the looks of it, he appeared to be in an extremely miserable state. Again. Grade 8 smash. Bang. Bang. In merely a moment, the third hall chief, who had been in an aggressive manner earlier, was currently being beaten by Xiao Yan left and right like a dead dog. An unknown number of bones in his body had been broken. Fresh blood scattered over the sky like rain. Just looking at it caused one to feel a chill surge into one's heart. Even though this was the case, he still did his best to dodge Xiao Yan's attacks. Even so, his distorted bloody face actually revealed a vicious and ruthless smile, which caused one to feel incomparably strange. Bang! Another explosion sounded. Xiao Yan sent the third hall master flying thousands of miles with a punch. His body once again flashed and appeared 1,000 feet in front of the third hall master. His hands were behind his back. A pair of eyes, which were filled with bright flames, calmly looked at the third hall master. The corners of his mouth lifted into a cold smile, but he did not say anything. The third hall master's body, which was covered in blood, suddenly shook. The black fog that lingered around his body was instantly absorbed into his body. He let out a savage laugh and immediately looked at Xiao Yan with a murderous intent in his eyes. Tsk. Flame Emperor Xiao Yan, you have been smart all your life. However, only today will you be foolish. I've just suffered a loss at your hands, but you've suffered a second time. The third hall master's eyes were filled with a brutal murderous intent. His pair of sinister old eyes were filled with madness as he stared at Xiao Yan and laughed maniacally. Do you think I'll be at a disadvantage twice? May I know what you mean? Xiao Yan's eyes flickered deep within his eyes. The corners of his mouth lifted into a playful smile as he looked at the third hall master and slowly asked. The eyes of the third hall master became incomparably savage when he heard this. It was as though Xiao Yan was already in his bag. Xiao Yan, do you really think that I, an 8-star ban emperor, will be suppressed by you, a 5-star ban emperor, until I am in such a state? Xiao Yan did not speak. He only quietly looked at the third hall master. He knew that the third hall master would give him an answer. You are wrong. With my strength, although I do not dare to say that I can capture you with one hand, I can also do it if I am given enough time. And you have coincidentally given me this time. Before his voice sounded, the third hall master slowly lifted both of his hands. A mysterious seal suddenly appeared in his palms. From the looks of this seal, it was the mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm that the old flame demon ghost had displayed back then. TSK. This palm technique is originally an E-class Do technique. Although I am unable to completely unleash it due to my lack of strength, if I were to use all of my strength, it would definitely not be inferior to a high-level human class Do technique. Xiao Yan, no matter what, you will definitely fall into my hands today. Xiao Yan's expression remained extremely calm when he heard this. High-level human class Do technique, huh? He seemed to have one as well. Moreover, if one were to really talk about it, a high-level human class Do technique that had transformed into a Do technique was not something that an ordinary high-level human class Do technique could compare with. Xiao Yan smiled faintly. His hand, which was behind him, was slowly withdrawn in front of his chest. He flipped his palm and a fire lotus that was burning with a brilliant flame appeared in Xiao Yan's hand. Due to the absence of the nihility devouring flame, the merged heavenly flames had become a substitute for the nihility devouring flame. In this way, the strength of this angry Buddha lotus flame should not be inferior to the 4-colored fire lotus from back then. Moreover, due to it being merged with many heavenly flames, the strength of this fire lotus might be even greater than before. When the third hall master saw the fire lotus in Xiao Yan's hand, a shock immediately surged onto his originally arrogant face. It was unexpected that while he was scheming against Xiao Yan was actually using him to scheme against him. However, this thought merely lasted for an instant before it was completely suppressed by the third hall master. His shocked face once again recovered its arrogance. His face was filled with disdain as he looked at the fire lotus in Xiao Yan's hand. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a cold smile as he coldly laughed. Xiao Yan, I was wondering what kind of frightening preparation you had. It turns out that you merely have this angry Buddha lotus flame that is comparable to a low-level human class Do technique. TSK. If this is the case, you will definitely not be able to escape from my hands today. Xiao Yan's face remained calm in the face of this. In the next instant, a murderous intent surged into his eyes as he looked at the third hall master. His palm pushed the fire lotus in his hand toward the third hall master. At the same time, his mouth laughed coldly as he spoke. I will only know exactly how strong it is after I see it. Let me see just how strong your high human class Do technique, mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm is. The third hall master was extremely confident in his heart at this moment. He was naturally not afraid of Xiao Yan's attack. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a cold smile. A brutal murderous intent swiftly surged within his eyes. He unleashed the mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm in his hand and charged toward Xiao Yan's angry Buddha lotus flame. Since you are in such a hurry to seek death, the old me shall fulfill your wish. The palm-sized mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm swiftly swelled in this empty space. In merely an instant, it once again turned into an enormous palm that reached the sky. It violently smashed toward Xiao Yan. However, Xiao Yan was unconcerned about this. His expression carried a solemn expression as he looked at the angry Buddha lotus flame that had already flown out. Ever since the last time, Xiao Yan was already extremely clear that his control of the angry Buddha lotus flame was only limited to before the third wave of attacks. If it was completely unleashed, even in this condition, Xiao Yan would definitely not be able to escape. Hence, at this moment, the only thing that Xiao Yan paid attention to was not the third hall master, nor was it the mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm. Instead, it was this destructive angry Buddha lotus flame that Xiao Yan had created. In an instant, the angry Buddha lotus flame and the mysterious underworld soul-devouring palm were merely a couple of dozen feet apart. Both of them were man-class high-level Do skills. The empty space where they passed had already turned into a dark black deep darkness. The sky also repeatedly trembled and roared under the frightening pressure of these two. The area within a 5,000-kilometer radius was deathly silent. There was no sign of life. That Mu Ling had already left this place and his whereabouts were unknown. Next, it was up to Xiao Yan and the third Hall Master. Two Super Do skills were unleashed together. If they were careless, the two of them might be Tang Tang Bandy experts, but they would still not be able to escape death. Hence, the battle today completely depended on fate. An instant later, the entire sky was finally covered by a glaring white glow. Even the deep mountains and old forests tens of thousands of kilometers away were illuminated by this white glow until they were unable to look directly at it. The people within the cities also felt an extremely frightening pressure sweep over in an instant. Even those people who had been in high positions for a long time finally knelt on the ground in fear. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. At this moment, a roaring sound that resounded over the sky suddenly sounded in the area where Xiao Yan and the third Hall Master were located. Immediately, one could see a frightening flame wave sweep over the entire sky. Even with the strength of the third Hall Master, he was not lucky enough to escape being struck by this attack. With a grug sound, fresh blood was wildly spat out from the mouth of the third Hall Master. His body also involuntarily shot backwards. The aura of his entire body instantly became sluggish at this moment. However, this was not the end. Before the first wave of flame wave could completely sweep over, another wave was once again shot out. This time around, the third Hall Master was really helpless. This second attack once again smashed into his chest. Bang! Another wave of extremely ferocious flame wave swept over. The entire world was in a kind of blazing heat. Everything that had form was turned into a vacuum of nothingness. After the third wave, the third Hall Master was finally seriously injured. Once the final wave completely engulfed him, the third Hall Master would definitely disappear from this continent. Roar! Damn it! This old man is not willing to accept this. Not willing to accept this. Flame Emperor Xiao Yan. Today, even if this old man dies, I will definitely drag you down with me. Ha! With a furious roar, the third Hall Master's body rapidly expanded. Immediately after, an earth-shaking roar sounded. Another wave of frightening pitch-black energy wave swept out and violently collided with the fourth wave of flame wave from the angry Buddha Lotus Flame. The self-destruction of the full power of an 8-star half-martial emperor. This kind of power was really unparalleled. Even if the fourth wave of the angry Buddha Lotus Flame was completely unleashed, it was still instantly broken by the third Hall Master's life-risking attack. In an instant, after the third Hall Master exchanged his life for Xiao Yan's angry Buddha Lotus Flame, this attack from the third Hall Master was finally completely suppressed by the third Hall Master. As for this part of the sky, it had turned into a pitch-black nothingness for a long time. Ugh, the ending is not good. Because a lot of the content was deleted, there are some things that were not clearly expressed. However, I still want to add this to my collection. I beg of everyone. Please add this to your collection. Additionally, if you are interested, you can join the group created by Time. Group number 476668761_OV. Chapter 97. 2 months later, southwest border, Savage Ancient City. Xiao Yan stood outside of the Savage Ancient City. His eyes looked into the distance at the ancient city that was built from a piece of mysterious rock. An endless stream of human traffic entered and exited the city gate like ants. If one were to carefully observe, one would discover that most of these people were entering and very few were exiting. Are these people all here for the alchemist conference? I wonder how strong the alchemists here are? Lin Fan asked. Xiao Yan had an indifferent smile on his face as he looked at the ancient city that was filled with an ancient aura. He softly muttered before his body moved and flew towards Savage Ancient City. At this moment, Xiao Yan could already be considered to have complete control over the initial wind movement Heaven's End. If Xiao Yan were to unleash his full speed, it was likely that he would not need to be afraid even if he met an ordinary 7-star bandit. If he were to encounter a 6-star half-emperor, Xiao Yan might even be able to forcefully kill him if he were to go all out. From this, one could see just how frightening the might of this sky extinction step was. Just the initial mastery of the wind movement stage was already able to allow Xiao Yan, a mere 3-star bandit, to face a 7-star bandit. Just how frightening would it be if he were to master this sky absolute step to the complete mastery stage? The might of trampling the heavens, the sky-splitting extinction step. This sentence was most likely not just a casual remark. A moment later, Xiao Yan's figure was strolling within the flood of human flow in Savage Ancient City. As the alchemist grand meeting drew closer, the outstanding talents from various places also began to gather towards Savage Ancient City. Xiao Yan naturally did not pay too much attention to these people. After arriving at Savage Ancient City, Xiao Yan's first task was to quickly find the weapon refiner that Luo Jin had mentioned back then. In Xiao Yan's heart, he only wanted to repair his heavy Xian ruler. Other matters were not important in Xiao Yan's eyes. Of course, leaving the southern region could also be considered an important matter in Xiao Yan's heart. After all, regardless of where Xiao Yan went or to what extent he had repaired the heavy Xian ruler, if Xiao Yan did not possess sufficient strength, the destruction of the heavy Xian ruler was only a matter of time. This was something that Xiao Yan did not wish to see. As he thought in this manner, Xiao Yan's footsteps unknowingly became a little faster. In a moment, he had already arrived at the city area of Savage Ancient City. When he arrived at this place, noise unceasingly filled his ears. Under the probing of Xiao Yan's spiritual strength, the average strength of the practitioners here was much better than that of Qingyang City. In this place, the weakest practitioner was actually comparable to the central plains of the Dou-Qi continent. They were all Dou Huangs. Among them, there was no lack of Dou Zongs. Even the elite Dou Zuns, who could be called overlord in Qingyang City, were just like ordinary people in this place. Moreover, under Xiao Yan's probing, there were no less than 10 elite Dou Shangs. Such strength could be considered quite a good faction in the borders of the continent. These were naturally nothing in Xiao Yan's eyes. However, if he thought about it carefully, he would realize that this was merely the most barren place on the continent. Yet, the strength of the people here had already reached the Dou Huang class. They were not the least bit inferior to the three valleys of the Dou-Qi continent. When the three valleys were mentioned, Xiao Yan recalled the Burning Flame Valley at this moment. Thinking back, his ancestor Xiao Xian had already told him that the Burning Flame Valley was considered one of the top factions on the continent during the ancient times. The Burning Flame Valley had once produced an elite Dou Di. Although he was ignorant back then and did not know that the so-called Dou Di they spoke of was merely a bandit in this Yuanwu continent, regardless of how one put it, this still meant that the people from the Burning Flame Valley had once come to this Yuanwu continent during the ancient times. However, he did not know if he would be able to meet them now. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth was slightly lifted into a smile as he sighed emotionally in his heart. If they were fated, they would naturally meet. Why should he be anxious about everything? After recovering, Xiao Yan's body, which was about to continue walking forward, suddenly paused. His brows were also involuntarily knit together. His body slowly turned around and his eyes looked at a building beside him. This building was shaped like a tower. It had an ancient feel. At a glance, for words would suddenly leap out of one's heart. Rich and overbearing. This pavilion was shockingly built from top-quality black metal wood. On its exterior, there was a barrier that was personally placed by a bandit. If someone really wanted to forcefully barge in, it was likely that it would be impossible unless one possessed the strength of a true Dou Di. A glint flickered in Xiao Yan's eyes. His gaze also slowly shifted downwards. Finally, it paused on the signboard above the door. On the signboard, the words, Hidden Cloud Pavilion, were written in flamboyant calligraphy. The words were written in a very imposing manner. The moment Xiao Yan's gaze swept across the three large words, his eyes narrowed slightly. The three large words seemed to contain a kind of heaven-supporting strength. Even with his current strength, he was actually as insignificant as an ant in front of it. This Yunin pavilion was actually another huge object. Xiao Yan's expression changed slightly. His gaze swiftly shifted away from the signboard. This was because after feeling a little surprised, he finally calmed down the emotions in his heart. His body moved and he took large strides toward the Yunin pavilion. Xiao Yan felt that there might be something he needed in this place. The moment he stepped into the Yunin pavilion, the noisy outside suddenly quieted down. This Yunin pavilion was like another world. Xiao Yan didn't mind this at all. To him, this kind of thing was too normal. The only thing he wasn't used to was that the moment he stepped into the Yunin pavilion, the light in front of him dimmed. Xiao Yan habitually narrowed his eyes for a moment. Only then did he take in a deep breath and take in everything within the Yunin pavilion. After he recovered, Xiao Yan immediately smelled an extremely rich pill fragrance. The pill fragrance was so rich that it even formed clouds in the air. At this moment, the Yunyin pavilion looked like a paradise on earth. Xiao Yan couldn't help but rub his nose. Even so, he couldn't help but sneeze in the end. This kind of rich pill fragrance was really hard for people to accept. He really did not know how these people were able to endure it. They were actually able to turn a blind eye to such a rich pill fragrance. Xiao Yan sighed in his heart. He didn't pay any more attention to them. As he looked around, he saw that this incomparably spacious hall was already occupied by many transparent crystal counters. The counters were filled with all kinds of medicinal ingredients. At this moment, these crystal counters were already surrounded by a large crowd. The interior of this large hall was also divided into a medicinal ingredient area and a medicinal pill area. However, these medicinal ingredients and medicinal pills, which could be considered great treasures in the eyes of everyone in front of him, were merely third-rate goods that Xiao Yan did not even care about. After casually looking around, Xiao Yan moved his feet and headed towards the second floor. When he reached the staircase, Xiao Yan was blocked by two old men in front of him. The eyebrows of the two old men involuntarily knit slightly when they saw that Xiao Yan was actually walking toward them. From the looks of it, it appeared that he wanted to go up to the second floor. Immediately, they looked at Xiao Yan. One of the old men revealed a kind smile on his face as he spoke to Xiao Yan. If you wish to go to the second floor, you must possess the strength of a Do Zong. Xiao Yan merely smiled faintly at this. He had experienced these rules countless times and was naturally incomparably clear about them. The truly good things in this Yunyin pavilion were definitely on the second floor. His footsteps did not stop. The aura on Xiao Yan's body suddenly swept out. However, this aura was many times weaker than usual. When the two old men sensed the aura on Xiao Yan's body, their expressions involuntarily changed. Surprise was revealed in their eyes when they looked at Xiao Yan. This was the first time that they had seen such a young Do Zong in this ancient wasteland city. That's right. Under the spiritual perception of these two old men, the aura that Xiao Yan was currently emitting was indeed that of a Do Zong. This was also something that Xiao Yan had intentionally done. After all, if he were to really release his true strength, Xiao Yan was not certain just how big of a commotion it would cause. Moreover, this Yunyin pavilion was clearly not an ordinary faction. It was best for him not to attract too much attention. However, although Xiao Yan had unintentionally attracted the attention of others, when he released the aura of a Do Zong, the expressions of the few Do Huang class cultivators, who were mocking him when they saw him preparing to go up to the second floor, appeared extremely interesting at this moment. This included many other people. At this moment, their gazes were also focused on Xiao Yan, this young Do Zong expert. It was not as though they had never seen a Do Zong of this age. Recently, there had indeed been a couple of 20-plus-year-old Do Zongs in this ancient wasteland city. However, those few were all members of famous aristocratic families. Any one of them would cause everyone to feel that they were familiar with them. At this moment, Xiao Yan appeared to be an exception. Xiao Yan was naturally not too concerned about this. He nodded and smiled at the two old men. Seeing this, the two old men also revealed a kind smile to Xiao Yan. Their bodies tilted slightly and opened up a path for Xiao Yan. Immediately, Xiao Yan gently lifted his feet. His body moved and stepped into the staircase that led to the second floor. His body slowly disappeared from everyone's sight. Chapter 98. Xiao Yan's footsteps did not pause once he reached the second floor. He ignored those elite Do Zongs on the second floor as his footsteps did not stop. Instead, he walked directly to the stairs leading to the third floor. This time around, Xiao Yan did not perform any courteous actions. The aura within his body swiftly rose to the Do Zun class. That aura that belonged to an elite Do Zun suddenly swept toward the old man seated in front of the stairs. That old man involuntarily frowned when he saw this. He was just about to stand up and warn Xiao Yan when he suddenly sensed the wild, violent aura that belonged to an elite Do Zun from Xiao Yan's body. The expression on his old face changed once again. His action of getting up was forcefully suppressed. His face was filled with surprise as he looked at Xiao Yan. His heart repeatedly wondered when such a young elite Do Zun had appeared in the ancient wasteland. However, the expression on Xiao Yan's face appeared extremely calm. He did not have the opportunity to see the uncertain expression of the old man in front of him. He took a step forward and stepped into the third floor in front of everyone's eyes. The old man only recovered after Xiao Yan's figure walked past the old man. He turned his head and looked at Xiao Yan's back, which was slowly disappearing from his sight. His brows were tightly knit. A moment later, he could only helplessly shake his head. He turned around and continued to sit cross-legged on the spot, ignoring Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's actions were the same as before after he reached the third floor. The aura within his body instantly soared and only came to a slow stop when it reached the Doushang class. The expression in the eyes of the elder guarding the pavilion also changed a long while later. He sent Xiao Yan to the fourth floor with a smile in front of everyone's shocked eyes. After Xiao Yan and the old man disappeared, the elite Douzuns on the third floor, who appeared to be a couple of times more sparse than before, finally involuntarily began to discuss. Such a young elite Doushang. Even some of the old people, who had long been famous in the southwestern region, involuntarily revealed some surprise in their eyes when they looked at Xiao Yan. During this short period of time, the people outside of the Yunin Pavilion had also heard that there was a young elite Douzong, a young elite Douzun, and a young elite Doushang. Although it was said that there were 3 people, when these people gathered all the characteristics of the 3 people together, they instantly understood that the 3 people mentioned were the same person. Xiao Yan's motive for doing all this had been completely guessed by these people. It was just to avoid some unnecessary trouble. However, it was a pity that Xiao Yan's intentions seemed to have backfired. It made more people aware of his existence as a heaven-defying figure. Once Xiao Yan reached the 4th floor, the space in front of him instantly became much more spacious. The number of people on the 4th floor was indeed much less than the few floors below. However, if one were to talk about the strength of the people standing on the 4th floor, it was something that the people below could not compare with. This was because, with the exception of a few people, the rest of them were all elite Doushangs. The strength of an elite Doushang was the minimum requirement to enter the 4th floor. From this, one could see just how intimidating the might of the Yunin Pavilion was. Even those elite Douzuns, who usually had to be respected in every way in the outside world, could only obediently follow the rules here. From the looks of it, even elite Doushangs did not dare to have any thoughts about the 5th floor, which was 1 level higher. The strength of the Yunin Pavilion could be slightly revealed in such a small matter. From this, one could see how great it was. Xiao Yan randomly swept his eyes over the stairs that led to the 5th floor. His eyes swept over the old man seated cross-legged. After which, he turned his eyes. His eyes seemed to randomly look at the counters. The moment Xiao Yan's eyes shifted away from the old man's eyes, which had been shut, were slowly opened a little. His eyes instantly swept over Xiao Yan. The eyes that he used to look at Xiao Yan also revealed an incomparably shocked glint at this moment. There was also some uncertainty flowing deep within his eyes. Just who is this person? His cultivation has already reached the level of a Bandi Zun at such a young age. Such talent is not the least bit inferior to the young master. Looks like I will need to tell the young master about this matter when I have the opportunity. The old man's eyes continued to sweep over Xiao Yan. His heart was also repeatedly pondering. Finally, he once again took a deep look at Xiao Yan. After which, the seated figure slowly disappeared. Even the many elite Doushangs present did not sense the slightest unusual movement. Xiao Yan, on the other hand, turned his head and randomly swept his eyes over the old man's body after it slowly disappeared. After which, he stepped forward and walked to a counter. How could the people who could ascend to the 4th floor be small fries? The attendants were naturally extraordinary. Xiao Yan's feet had just moved when a white-haired old man wearing a brocade robe came forward with a face full of smiles. Xiao Yan observed his aura. The strength of this old man had already reached the Doushang class. The strength of the other attendants was similar to him. It was likely that no one would dare to cause trouble in this hall with them around. At this moment, Xiao Yan's appearance had already attracted the attention of all the elite Doushangs. Everyone revealed a surprised expression on their faces when they saw that this elite Doushang, who had just arrived, was actually this young. Their eyes contained a rich surprise flashing within them. An elite Doushang at such a young age could really be called an existence that defied the natural order. If Xiao Yan, who only possessed the aura of a Douzun earlier, could be described as a demon. However, Xiao Yan, whose aura had reached the Doushang class at this moment, possessed a frightening talent. Only the word, defying the natural order, could barely describe him. It was just that one did not know just what kind of interesting expression these people would reveal on their faces once they became aware that Xiao Yan's true strength was that of a Bandi Zun. How could the word, defying the natural order, be able to completely describe Xiao Yan's frightening talent? At this moment, everyone in the hall had also remembered Xiao Yan in their hearts after sensing the genuine Do Sheng aura on Xiao Yan's body. The frightening talent that Xiao Yan had displayed at this moment was sufficient to cause them to view him with great importance. His strength had already reached such a heaven-defying level at such a young age. If he were to truly mature in the future, would he not become a frightening existence like a giant? How could this cause them to not view Xiao Yan with great importance? However, compared to all of this, Xiao Yan, who was the main character of the whole, did not pay any attention to this in his heart. His eyes were merely focused on a certain counter in the hall. He was already completely certain that there was something there that he needed at this moment. Chapter 99. As Xiao Yan lifted his foot, the elder beside him also noticed the direction of Xiao Yan's gaze. Immediately, a glint flashed in his old eyes. He had a rough idea of what Xiao Yan wanted to see. This elder was indeed someone who had worked in the Yunyin Pavilion for many years. With just a glance, he was able to detect what Xiao Yan wanted. It was not an exaggeration to say that old people were shrewd when used on him. Before Xiao Yan could step forward, the elder had already stepped forward. He moved past the crowd in the hall and arrived in front of the crystal counter. With a glance, he stared at a palm-sized jade box on the counter. This jade box looked as clear as crystal and emitted a chilling aura that seeped into one's soul. Clearly, this jade box was no ordinary item. Through the translucent jade box, one could clearly see that within the jade box, there was a palm-sized crimson-red crystal that was quietly lying within. Even though the jade box was doing its best to block it, one could still feel an extremely violent fire-type energy wreaking havoc in the small space outside the jade box, causing the space to slightly distort. One could only imagine how terrifying the fire energy contained within this crystal was. At this moment, Xiao Yan's gaze passed through the crowd in front of him and landed on the jade box. More accurately, it was the scarlet-red crystal that was emitting a scorching heat within the jade box. This was also the reason why Xiao Yan had entered the Yunyin Pavilion this time. Xiao Yan's face was filled with joy and the corners of his mouth involuntarily curled into an extremely satisfied smile. The gaze that he used to look at the jade box was filled with determination. Although the old man's face carried a twilight color, his pair of old eyes were extremely sharp. The satisfied smile on the corner of Xiao Yan's mouth was completely absorbed into his eyes. Immediately, the elder carefully and quickly took out the jade box and placed it on the crystal counter in front of him. After which, he once again looked at Xiao Yan and chuckled as he opened his mouth and said, "May I ask if you are willing to buy this flame essence jade for my pavilion?" Xiao Yan once again smiled in his heart. This little old man was really wise. He actually took the initiative to speak before the buyer. "Could it be that you are so sure that I want to buy your item?" Smiling slightly in his heart, Xiao Yan also regained his senses and looked at the elder. The corners of his mouth curled into a heartwarming smile as he gently nodded in the elder's eyes. At this moment, Xiao Yan's action of nodding his head had just paused when a voice that was not very harmonious was suddenly emitted from within the hall. "This flame essence jade flame is mine." When these words rang out, everyone in the hall was stunned. Soon after, the crowd slowly parted and two figures slowly walked out. Everyone in the hall involuntarily frowned when they saw the two of them. Their eyes contained some pity as they looked at Xiao Yan. It was as though they were telling Xiao Yan that this fellow was not someone to be trifled with. At this moment, Xiao Yan's eyes contained some displeasure as he looked at the two of them. He directly ignored the warning eyes of the others. They were merely a Ban Sheng and an 8-star Do Sheng. This kind of strength was unable to stir any great waves in front of Xiao Yan. The elder in charge of the sale was clearly quite familiar with the two of them. His expression changed a little as he looked at the two of them. His brows involuntarily knit together. "Childly, this flame essence jade flame is something that this young master wants to buy. Therefore, I hope that Childly can take back your words." However, the younger man among the two of them snorted coldly in the face of this elder's persuasion. He immediately opened his mouth and laughed coldly. "Oh, is that so? In that case, I'm really sorry. Everyone seated here and I did not see this." Mr. nod his head. "I say everyone, am I right?" He turned his eyes to the elite Do Shang standing beside him as he spoke. His eyes contained some ill intent as he asked. The expressions of those people changed when they came into contact with his eyes. Their eyes involuntarily looked at the old man beside him. That old man seemed to have some indulgence in the actions of this young man in front of him. It was as though all of this did not matter whether the young man in front of him did it or not. A soft snort was emitted from the old man's nose. His face was indifferent as he swept his gaze over everyone in the hall. Anyone who was stared at by his gaze would have fear surging into their eyes. Immediately after, they lowered their heads and did not say a word. At this moment, Child Li's eyes were filled with a cold smile as he looked at Xiao Yan. He had not come to the Union Pavilion for anything important. This flame essence jade flame was not part of his plan. However, this sudden arrival of Xiao Yan had snatched his limelight in an instant. It should be known that he, Li Kong, was the true pride of this ancient savage city. He had stepped into the Banshang class at a young age and had always been respected and admired by tens of thousands of people ever since he made his debut. Although he was far inferior to the young master of the Union Pavilion, he was the only person he did not submit to. However, when he thought about it, this Xiao Yan, who had suddenly arrived, appeared to be around the same age as him. Moreover, looking at Xiao Yan's soft and tender appearance, it was likely that Xiao Yan was really a little younger than him. Despite this, Xiao Yan's strength had already reached the true Do Shang class. He was many times stronger than a fake Shang like him. This was also the reason why he wanted to speak out and compete with Xiao Yan. Today he, Li Kong, wanted to suppress Xiao Yan's limelight and let him understand who was the main character in this ancient savage city. All of this was naturally seen by the old man in front of the counter. However, the strength of the old man beside the young man was indeed extraordinary. This young man's background could be considered to be quite strong in this ancient savage city. At this moment, even he felt quite helpless in his heart. He could only hesitate for a moment before opening his mouth once again to speak. Child Li, I hope that you can understand that this is my Union Pavilion. Please abide by the rules of my Union Pavilion. This flame essence jade flame was something that this young master had agreed to buy. I hope that young master will take back his words. When the old man's words left his mouth, he directly mentioned the rules of the Union Pavilion, causing Li Kang's expression to change slightly. However, an instant later, the old man's words turned into a cold snort from Li Kang's mouth. This time around, he ignored the old man. Instead, he directly looked at Xiao Yan. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a cold smile as he stared at Xiao Yan and said, "If you don't want anything to happen to you, get out of this ancient savage city. Otherwise what?" Before Li Kong could finish speaking, Xiao Yan's cold voice was suddenly transmitted over. At this moment, anyone could hear the trace of anger within Xiao Yan's words. At this moment, Xiao Yan had placed all of his attention on the flame essence jade flame. Originally, he had planned to directly leave the Union Pavilion after obtaining it. After all, it should not take long for him to do so. However, this Li Kong had forcefully wasted all of Xiao Yan's time here. This really caused some irritation to surge into Xiao Yan's heart. When Li Kong heard Xiao Yan's words, a fury involuntarily flashed across his brows. The person in front of him was really bold. An ordinary Do Shang actually dared to rebuke him in such a manner in front of an 8-star Do Shang. How could this young master of the Li clan not feel humiliated in his heart? Good. What a heaven-defying person. Your future achievements might not be low. In the future, this young master might not be able to touch you. However, this does not mean that I can now. Today, the day you leave this Union Pavilion will be the day you die. Li Kang's face actually revealed a ruthless expression when he spoke until this point. His words were also filled with viciousness. You are very noisy. At this moment, Xiao Yan's heart had really become a little impatient. He dared to guarantee that if this fellow in front of him spoke another word, he would immediately crush him. First, young Master Li, don't tell me that you intend to continue causing trouble in my Union Pavilion. Just as Li Kong was about to continue saying something to Xiao Yan and the Do Qi within Xiao Yan's body was about to move, another voice broke through the air and was transmitted over. This caused the expressions of everyone in the hall to harden. Even Xiao Yan involuntarily frowned. The Do Qi that was about to rise within his body once again recovered its calmness. The calmness of the Do Qi within Xiao Yan's body also caused the person who had spoken earlier to sigh in relief in his heart. Li Kang's heart became even angrier when he heard these words that were directed at him. However, he did not dare to act rashly in front of this person who had appeared at this moment. He could only soften his tone as he opened his mouth to speak. Elder Xian must be joking. How would this junior dare to cause trouble in the Yunyin Pavilion? The Elder Xian coldly snorted when he heard this. He did not say anything to Li Kong. Instead, he directly opened his mouth to speak. The old me has already seen everything that has happened today. This flame essence chalcedony was indeed obtained by this friend first. My Yunyin Pavilion should abide by the pavilion's rules and sell it to this friend. At this point, anyone could tell that this person was clearly here for Xiao Yan. Although Li Kong was unwilling in his heart, he could only suppress the resentment in his heart. He did not dare to say anything else as he nodded his head in agreement. However, the gaze that he used to look at Xiao Yan was filled with endless resentment. Clearly, the current Xiao Yan had already become a thorn in his side and a thorn in his flesh. In his opinion, Xiao Yan would definitely die today. However, Xiao Yan did not have the time to care about this at this moment. At this moment, all of his attention was focused on this old man. Xiao Yan had a feeling that this old man was not necessarily helping him because of his strength. However, the reason behind this was still unknown. However, it was likely that there would be an answer soon. Chapter 100. My friend, may I know your name? Elder Xian changed his tone and ignored Li Kang's bitter expression. Instead, he smiled as he looked at Xiao Yan, who was standing to the side, and asked with a smile. Others might not be able to see Xiao Yan's true strength, but how could he not? A middle 3-star half-martial emperor could be considered an extremely strong expert in the ancient savage city. Although Li Kong also had an extraordinary background in the savage ancient city, if he really wanted to touch the young man in front of him, it was likely that he would have to think twice before doing so. When Xiao Yan heard the Elder Xian's words, a faint smile appeared on his face. He cupped his hands towards Elder Xian and said with a smile, I am Yan Xiao. When Elder Xian heard this, a glint flashed across his eyes. He also replied with a smile and then said, Little friend Yan Xiao, it is my Hidden Cloud Pavilion's fault for not being able to uphold justice for you in today's matter. Hence, I have wasted quite a bit of your time. In that case, I shall treat this flame jade essence as a way to acknowledge you as my friend and also as an apology gift from my Hidden Cloud Pavilion. I will not accept a single cent of this item. I will give it to you. When Elder Xian said these words, the expressions of everyone in the hall, including Li Kong, changed once again. It was clear that he wanted to be on good terms with Yan Xiao. That was why he was so generous. It should be known that the Yunyin Pavilion was a superpower. The items within the Yunyin Pavilion were all priceless treasures that were difficult to find in the outside world. However, the items within the Yunyin Pavilion were all extremely expensive. Therefore, the Yunyin Pavilion had another name in the outside world. Heavenly Rare Pavilion. These 3 simple words were enough to explain the true value of the Yunyin Pavilion. In many people's opinion, this was perhaps the true reason why the Yunyin Pavilion was able to possess such strength. After all, without sufficient resources and power, who would be willing to join the Yunyin Pavilion? When Xiao Yan heard Elder Xian's words, his expression couldn't help but be slightly startled. Even if Elder Xian knew that he was a half-martial emperor expert, this alone wasn't enough for him to hand over the flame essence chalcedony. As for what Elder Xian said about fairness and injustice, Xiao Yan didn't believe it at all. Those words were only used to fool ghosts. Xiao Yan didn't think that he had anything on him that was worth Elder Xian doing this. After all, even with his current strength, he couldn't even be ranked in the Yunyin Pavilion. However, if that was the case, why did Elder Xian give him the flame essence chalcedony? Xiao Yan didn't have the heart to think about it after a long while. To the current Xiao Yan, as long as he could obtain the flame essence chalcedony, Elder Xian's motive wasn't that important. If Elder Xian really wanted to do anything to him, Xiao Yan was confident that he wouldn't be able to return alive. Then I thank Elder Xian. Xiao Yan cupped his hands again and nodded slightly as he smiled at Elder Xian. Elder Xian once again smiled when he heard this. A glint flickered in his old eyes. The various thoughts in Xiao Yan's heart had mostly been guessed by him. The eyes with which he looked at Xiao Yan had an additional admiration. What is young friend Yan Xiao saying? Today's matter was originally due to my Yunyin Pavilion not handling things properly. This resulted in someone wanting to forcefully snatch it. The old me should give young friend Yan Xiao an explanation. Where is the thanks coming from? Elder Xian's words, which had a hidden meaning, caused Li Kong, who had been standing by the side with his head lowered and not speaking, to turn extremely red. The fury in his heart was about to explode. If Elder Xian wasn't present at this moment, it was likely that he, Li Kong, would have forcefully attacked Xiao Yan even if this was the Union Pavilion. The expressions of the many elite Do Shangs from the other factions changed when they sensed the vaguely present wild killing intent from Li Kang's body. It was as though they were afraid of offending this murderous god. All of them bowed to Elder Xian and left. The hall on the 4th floor had also become empty within a short moment. The only ones who remained were Li Kong and the 8-star Do Shang behind him. Of course, Xiao Yan was not in a hurry to leave. After all, Li Kong was still here. He wanted to see just what Li Kong was planning to do. Elder Xian felt helpless in his heart when he saw the smile on the corner of Xiao Yan's mouth. His eyes were filled with disgust as he looked at Li Kong. Li Kong usually acted like a hedonistic son of a rich family. He had bullied others many times. However, due to his status, Elder Xian was unable to say anything. Moreover, Li Kang's grandfather also had some ability. As long as they were in this ancient wildland city, even the Union Pavilion would have to give him some face. This also caused Li Kong to not fear anyone in his heart. Even if he faced an elite Do Shang, he would still look down on them. However, he just had to meet Xiao Yan today. He could only blame himself for this. The silent atmosphere continued for a while. Only then did Elder Xian turn his eyes to Li Kong. He also knew that if Xiao Yan did not leave today, it was likely that Li Kong would continue to stay here. However, from the look on Xiao Yan's face, it was clear that he did not care about this. Elder Xian was helpless. He rolled his eyes and his expression became serious. He once again opened his mouth to speak to Li Kong. "Child Li, your actions just now have scared away all the guests of my Union Pavilion. According to the rules of my Union Pavilion, although you did not take any action, what you have done is already a fact. Therefore, Child Li, please leave my Union Pavilion. For the next month, you are not allowed to take even half a step into my Union Pavilion." Once these open words were spoken, Li Kang's expression instantly turned gloomy. At this moment, one could even hear the sound of him grinding his teeth in this silent hall. This was enough to show the fury in Li Kang's heart. "Child Li, don't tell me that you want to violate the rules of my Union Pavilion." At this moment, Elder Xian's old face revealed a cold and stern expression. As he spoke, he also used some Do Qi, causing the entire hall to tremble. With the addition of Do Qi, Elder Xian's words directly passed through the Union Pavilion and into the ears of the people in the city. Instantly, the people in the city were stunned once again. In this ancient wildland city, who did not know that the person known as Child Li was Li Kong? At this moment, Li Kong actually dared to violate the rules of the Union Pavilion. It was likely that even if his grandfather came, he would not be able to do anything. This bastard is really daring. He even dares to violate the rules of the Union Pavilion. Looking at the elder who spoke, it should be Elder Xian. Haha, serves him right. Shoo, lower your voice. If the people from the Li family hear you, be careful of your head. Once Elder Xian's words sounded out, there were immediately people who let out cold laughs. Of course, there were also people who cautiously reminded others. After all, Li Kang's reputation was well known in this ancient wildland city. If they could avoid offending him, they would naturally not be so bored as to seek death. At this moment, within the Union Pavilion, Li Kong naturally did not have the time to care about what the people in the outside world said about him. At this moment, there was only an endless fury in his heart. Even so, after struggling for a while in his heart, he still unwillingly acknowledged. Following which, he led the old man behind him and swiftly disappeared from the Union Pavilion. Brother Yan Xiao, now that the two of them have left, this old man has already given them the appropriate punishment. The unhappiness in your heart should naturally disappear, right? When Xiao Yan heard this, he smiled. How could he not know that Elder Xian was probably afraid that he would really kill the two of them in a fit of anger in the Union Pavilion? It's just a small matter. I don't care about it. However, if they still want to offend me, I am not someone who can be so easily bullied. When he saw the ruthless expression on Xiao Yan's face, Elder Xian's expression changed slightly. He let out a heroic laugh and once again opened his mouth to laugh. Haha, of course. Today's matter is only because no matter what, my Union Pavilion is still a business. If something were to happen, it would not be good for my reputation. However, outside of my Union Pavilion, what happens to Li Kong will depend on his own luck. Haha. However, Brother Yan Xiao, it is worth mentioning that Li Kang's grandfather is not weak. He is a 6-star half-martial emperor. I hope that Brother Yan Xiao will pay attention to him. When he heard this, a ray of light flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes. No wonder Li Kang dared to act so boldly. His grandfather's strength had already reached the level of a 6-star half-martial emperor. However, even if that was the case, to Xiao Yan, it was nothing. He had already killed 2 8-star half-martial emperors. A mere 6-star half-martial emperor was nothing to him. However, with regards to Elder Xian's kind warning, Xiao Yan couldn't possibly ignore it. After expressing his thanks, Xiao Yan once again softly laughed and said, "As long as he doesn't come and provoke me, I won't bother with him." When Xiao Yan said those words, Elder Xian's expression couldn't help but become slightly startled. With a 6-star half-martial emperor before him, Elder Xian actually dared to say such words. Elder Xian truly didn't know where Xiao Yan's courage came from. After smiling and nodding his head, Elder Xian didn't say anything else. As for Xiao Yan, he didn't have the heart to explain too much. If Li Kang's grandfather really wanted to attack him, Elder Xian would naturally understand. The two of them chatted for a little longer. However, Old Xian was completely speechless. Even with his shrewdness, he still felt a wave of helplessness when facing Xiao Yan. No matter what kind of clever interrogation he used, he was unable to obtain even the slightest bit of information about Xiao Yan. After a long while, Xiao Yan finally left the Yunin Pavilion under Elder Xian's strange gaze. As for Elder Xian, his figure also slowly disappeared as if he had never appeared. When Xiao Yan left the Yunin Pavilion, on the 6th floor of the Yunin Pavilion, which had never been visited by outsiders, a young man wearing a green robe was smiling as he watched Xiao Yan's figure slowly disappear into the crowd. Due to the barrier set up by the Dodi, Xiao Yan didn't notice that young man at all. Requesting a recommendation ticket. Requesting a collection. If you are interested, you can even join the group. Group number 4766686761. Chapter 101. Yunin Pavilion, on the 6th floor. Elder Xian's figure slowly appeared from a corner of the hall. He looked at the young man standing in front of the window with a smile full of admiration. After a long while, Elder Xian waited for the man to withdraw his gaze before he smiled and sighed. "Young master, it has been a long time since I've seen you pay so much attention to a person." The man laughed softly and did not reply. However, there was a flicker of light in his eyes. "How is it?" Clear and unique words slowly came out of his mouth. Elder Xian also understood what he was referring to. Without much hesitation, Elder Xian sighed softly and smiled. "This child is not ordinary. Even I have to be extremely careful when I talk to him. Moreover, he had also used a roundabout way to test the overall strength of my hidden cloud pavilion. If it wasn't for the fact that this old man was quite astute, perhaps he would have really gotten some information out of me." The man laughed again. However, he seemed to have expected this. He laughed softly and asked again, "Is he looking for something?" When Elder Xian heard this, he could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly. The young master seemed to be paying too much attention to that Yan Xiao. "That's not it. It's just that I followed your instructions and gave him a piece of flame jade essence that he wanted." The man nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. However, Elder Xian suddenly let out a soft chuckle and said, "That's right. When I was talking to him, I reminded him that Li Gan's strength was that of a 6-star half-emperor. However, his answer was a little strange." Without waiting for the man to ask, Elder Xian continued. He said that if Li Gan did not touch him, he would not be bothered. This was a little arrogant. Naturally, Elder Xian's words were not as simple as it seemed. He saw that the man in front of him was paying abnormal attention to Xiao Yan. He was afraid that the man had misjudged him. That was why he said such words. However, when these words left his mouth, the man let out an indescribable laughter. Immediately after, the man turned his head to look at Elder Xian and laughed. "Elder Xian, you said that he was arrogant. Haha, if you had seen how he killed an 8-star half-emperor cloud-splitting wolf with a single strike, I'm afraid that you would not have such thoughts." When these words were spoken, the expressions of the few half-emperors in the hall, including Elder Xian, all changed. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at the man. Killing an 8-star half-emperor with a single strike. How frightening the strength did he need to possess? Was he, a mere 3-star half-emperor, truly capable of such a feat. However, since these words were emitted from the mouth of this young man in front of them, everyone present naturally did not doubt him. Hence, at this moment, the position of Xiao Yan's strength in everyone's hearts could only be summed up in 4 words: pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. As for the figure that had been standing in front of the window, the young pavilion master that everyone in the savage ancient city spoke of, the true master behind the scenes of the Union Pavilion, was Luo Jin, who had been separated from Xiao Yan not long ago. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged on a bed within an inn. The flame mantra, Qi method within his body was slowly circulating. Between the heavens and the earth, an extremely pure natural energy also appeared from the space around Xiao Yan's body. It transformed into threads of energy threads that entered the Qi paths within Xiao Yan's body from the pores all over his body. Following the repeated circulation of the Qi method and after a couple of refinements, it finally followed the route of the Qi method and entered the vortex within Xiao Yan's body. This situation continued for a total of 4 hours before the vortex within Xiao Yan's body gradually stopped circulating. The vast natural energy that lingered around Xiao Yan's body also slowly scattered. The eyelids of Xiao Yan, who was still seated cross-legged on the bed, trembled slightly. He slowly opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, an incomparably sharp light suddenly shot out from Xiao Yan's eyes. It instantly tore through the empty space in front of him and disappeared into it. The corners of Xiao Yan's mouth curled into a smile. He did not care about this at all. With a flip of his hand, an exquisite jade box appeared in Xiao Yan's palm out of thin air. Ignoring the extremely cold temperature that could freeze mountains and rivers in the eyes of ordinary people, Xiao Yan opened the jade box in his hand. Within the jade box, the scarlet crystal that was the size of an adult's palm was finally completely exposed to the air at this moment. The moment it was exposed, the crystal seemed to want to vent the resentment that had accumulated over a long period of being sealed. Before the jade box could be completely opened, a terrifying flame that was even hotter than magma erupted from the crystal. It instantly swept over the guest room that Xiao Yan was in. The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth once again smiled in the face of this frightening flame that even an elite Do Shang had to be careful about. His mouth also softly muttered, "Your flame is really big. However, I don't want to lose money. How can I allow you to randomly destroy this place? Come back." A soft cry was emitted from his mouth. The frightening flame that had yet to truly sweep over the entire guest room appeared to have heard the command of a god as it swiftly withdrew. Although the flame was frightening, nothing within the guest room was damaged by that soft cry at this moment. Even the surface of the crystal was icy cold to the extreme. At this moment, the icy cold aura that had originally been completely suppressed once again surged violently. In merely an instant, the scarlet crystal had already turned into an ice cube that seemed to have a cluster of fire wrapped within ice. Xiao Yan's hand took out this ice cube that had instantly become a little bigger. The cold ice also swiftly disappeared. Only the scarlet crystal remained in Xiao Yan's hand. Flame Essence Jade Marrow. Cuckoo, it is really unexpected that I would actually find such a top-grade fire affinity flame crystal here. This Union Pavilion is really willing to part with it. The Flame Essence Jade Marrow was the true essence of the Flame Essence Jade. It contained an extremely wild and violent fire affinity energy. It was an extremely good type of fire affinity flame crystal. Xiao Yan was certain that if he were to spend money to buy it back then, it was likely that he would not be able to buy this Flame Essence Jade Marrow even if he were to fork out all 280,000 spirit coins that he currently had. From this, one could tell just how precious this Flame Essence Jade Marrow was. Anything that could be placed in the Union Pavilion was truly extraordinary. Xiao Yan's practice of the 9 transformation body skill was precisely what he needed. Without any hesitation, Xiao Yan kept the jade box. With a thought, an extremely frightening spiritual energy instantly swept out from between Xiao Yan's eyebrows. Immediately, 9 clones appeared in front of Xiao Yan. With a wave of his sleeve, the Flame Essence Jade Marrow in his hand instantly shot out and directly entered one of the 9 clones. With a thought, a cluster of magnificent flames instantly wrapped around that clone. The other 8 clones were instantly withdrawn. After all, a single fire affinity flame crystal could only be used to inscribe a single cultivation technique imprint. It was unable to support all 9 clones at the same time. With this thought in mind, Xiao Yan instantly reacted. In this way, he would have to live a life of being penniless in the future. With a soft sigh in his heart, Xiao Yan shook his head again and threw away the distracting thoughts in his mind. With a jolt of his mind, a frightening spiritual energy once again swept out. It transformed into an invisible sharp blade above Xiao Yan's head and flew towards the flame essence jade marrow. Clang! A crisp sound that resembled the sound of metal colliding suddenly echoed out from the depths of Xiao Yan's soul. At this moment, Xiao Yan could not help but furrow his eyebrows. I never expected that the process of inscribing a cultivation technique would be so difficult. Even with my Emperor stage soul, it is actually difficult to move it. It seems that it is not easy to truly condense this clone. With this thought flashing across his mind, Xiao Yan no longer held back. The boundless sea-like endless spiritual energy in his mind poured out and merged into the sharp spiritual energy blade. At this moment, under the infusion of Xiao Yan's enormous spiritual energy, the originally invisible sharp blade had completely turned into a substance at this moment. It was as if it truly existed, causing one to be speechless. Ha! With a stern cry in his heart, Xiao Yan's mind moved and controlled the sharp spiritual energy blade to slash out. It violently collided with the flame essence jade marrow. Clang! Another crisp sound rang out. A wave of invisible ripples spread out from the point of collision. However, the difference this time was that a pale white imprint was left on the flame essence jade marrow. Ugh, this chapter is rather short and I posted it a little late. I was only considering if I should delete some of the content. However, in the end, I still missed out some parts. Would it feel better if I wrote it all? Please recommend me. Please add it to your collection. Chapter 102. Within the guest room, Xiao Yan's spiritual strength was completely poured into the spiritual blade. The frightening spiritual strength caused the surrounding space to tremble unceasingly. There were even quite a number of spatial cracks that could be seen with the naked eye appearing in the space around him. At this moment, it seemed as though as long as he added a little more strength, this extremely fragile space would instantly shatter and transform into a deep and endless void. A half-emperor expert was indeed extremely powerful. Merely the agglomeration of his spiritual strength was actually able to create such a frightening scene. One really did not know just how frightening it would be if his spiritual strength was completely unleashed. At this moment, Xiao Yan naturally did not have the time to bother about this. A thought passed through his mind and the spiritual blade, which had already turned into a substance, suddenly moved. A blade once again ruthlessly pressed down on the flame jade essence. As the blade fell, a sharp sound that penetrated deep into the soul instantly attacked Xiao Yan's soul, causing Xiao Yan's soul to feel a piercing pain. The muscles on his face also twisted into a ball, causing him to look extremely frightening. It was really unexpected that even with Xiao Yan's spiritual strength, it was actually incomparably difficult to inscribe this flame jade essence. From the looks of it, if he wanted to completely inscribe this flame jade essence, he would need quite a lot of time. With regards to this, Xiao Yan could only helplessly smile. Compared to Do Qi, the things in this world were still far too weak when it came to the true use of spiritual strength. Even alchemists like them could only use their Do Qi to resist during a real battle. Their spiritual strength, which was usually extremely powerful, was still unable to unleash its true use at such a time. The human race's understanding and control of the soul power was still too little. The matter of the spiritual strength was the most mysterious thing in the world. Even until now, no one in this ancient continent was able to provide a true explanation. Being able to use spiritual strength as though it was an extension of one's arm was perhaps already the limit of what humans could discover. After all, even a soul skill that was controlled by one's spiritual strength was still extremely rare in this world. Although an E-class Do technique also possessed the amplification of one's spiritual strength, the main strength still relied on Do Qi. Xiao Yan involuntarily sighed after sighing emotionally in his heart. Although alchemists were the most popular profession on the continent, who would have known that alchemists were the most miserable people when the Hun clan was rampant on the Do Qi continent? A thread of fury involuntarily surged into Xiao Yan's heart when he thought of this. He gently shook his head. Immediately, he focused his attention and looked at the flame essence jade marrow. His spiritual strength surged wildly. There was an incomparably sharp cold glint churning within his eyes. Today, let me see just where the true limit of the D-state soul. Ha! A stern cry sounded in his heart. The spiritual blade that was agglomerated from his spiritual strength suddenly emitted a wave of dazzling white light. Soon after, the sharp blade swiftly shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. In merely a couple of breaths' time, the spiritual blade transformed from its original large blade that was dozens of feet in size into a 1-meter-long blade. Immediately, A thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind and it instantly moved. His strength broke through the empty air and slashed onto the flame jade essence. Clang! Xiao Yan's body suddenly shook after a clear sound appeared. His expression instantly turned pale. He did not have the time to bother about this. Xiao Yan did not wait for the spiritual ripple to spread before another slash landed. A mysterious diagram was finally slowly being formed on the surface of the flame jade essence. After these 2 consecutive slashes, the space around this avatar was finally unable to endure the pressure and shattered with a bang. When the spiritual ripple spread, an extremely ear-piercing buzzing sound was involuntarily emitted from this place. In an instant, a black mass of dark clouds churned in the sky above the inn where Xiao Yan was located. An unknown number of people within this savage ancient city were struck by the buzzing sound that spread and fell to the ground. There were even quite a number of weaker people who were blasted apart by the sound. They turned into a bloody fog that permeated the sky before completely disappearing from this place. At this moment, even those elite Do Shangs, who were usually high and mighty, were unable to endure the rumbling sound that was transmitted from their heads at this moment. They knelt on the ground one after another. Their teeth were tightly clenched and their faces were flushed red. The blood within their bodies continued to ache at this moment. Do Qi also poured out and covered themselves within it. In merely an instant, this savage ancient city, which was incomparably calm a moment ago, had suddenly turned into a storm. No one dared to move. Ha! Suddenly, a couple of stern cries that surged to the sky were transmitted from an unknown place within this savage ancient city. A couple of extremely frightening spiritual strengths also swept over this savage ancient city. Those people who were still within the savage ancient city were finally rescued when the spiritual strengths completely swept over. The buzzing sound that reverberated within their minds had also completely disappeared. In the next instant, a couple of human figures stood in the empty space outside the inn where Xiao Yan was located. All of them turned their eyes to Xiao Yan, who was in the room. However, the guest room that Xiao Yan was in had already turned into ruins at this moment. The roof had been forcefully blown away by the frightening sound from earlier. Xiao Yan's figure was completely exposed in front of the eyes of these couple of human figures. These people were all old men who appeared to be dozens of years old. When they looked at the current Xiao Yan, a trace of astonishment involuntarily flashed across their sharp old eyes. Even so, Xiao Yan's actions earlier were still rather inconsiderate to them. It had stirred up a storm in the entire city. It should be known that there was no lack of juniors of these old fellows within the crowd. If they still didn't say anything at this moment, they wouldn't be able to maintain their faces. After a moment of silence, one of the old men frowned slightly. He couldn't help but open his mouth to speak to Xiao Yan. Your actions just now truly show that you don't put us in your eyes. I wonder how you will give us old fellows an explanation. As the old man spoke, a frightening pressure instantly swept over the entire sky, causing the sky to involuntarily tremble. This old man's strength was already that of a 3-star half-emperor. He was not the slightest bit weaker than Xiao Yan. In this ancient savage city, he could already be considered as a genuine peak expert. However, Xiao Yan, who was seated in the sky, acted as though he didn't hear the old man's words. He continued to control the sharp spiritual blades and ruthlessly smashed them onto the flame essence jade marrow. As the blades landed, waves of extremely frightening spiritual ripples continuously spread out from the flame essence jade marrow. The rumbling sound that had swept over the sky earlier once again swept over. When they saw this scene, everyone present involuntarily frowned. Fury rose within the heart of the old man who had spoken earlier. The spiritual ripple from before had caused countless deaths and injuries among his subordinates. Yet, this brat in front of him actually dared to do it again. Wasn't he purposely provoking him? Moreover, Xiao Yan had actually ignored the words that he had said earlier. How could he simply sit back and do nothing in the face of this double fury? The old man's palm ruthlessly smashed forward, shattering the spiritual ripples with a bang. His body moved and he slammed his palm towards Xiao Yan. Just as he was in front of Xiao Yan, a sharp glint suddenly flashed across the old man's eyes. His palm violently slammed towards Xiao Yan's shoulder. Although the old man's heart was churning with fury, he was no fool. With his eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that Xiao Yan's strength was at the very most a little weaker than his own. Such a person caused the old man to be extremely astonished in his heart. At this moment, he had only attacked because he wanted to teach Xiao Yan a lesson. Unfortunately, Xiao Yan was not the kind of person who would allow him to do as he pleased. Before the old man's palm could land on Xiao Yan's shoulder, Xiao Yan's slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened. A sharp glint suddenly shot out from within his eyes. Immediately, Xiao Yan's palm violently struck forward, colliding with the old man's palm with a bang. Bang! A bang sounded out. Xiao Yan's body did not move as he sat in the air. That spiritual blade once again ferociously imprinted itself on the flame essence jade marrow. However, in the next moment, the expressions of the few old men around him changed. The originally soaring aura of the old man facing Xiao Yan suddenly scattered at this moment. His body also flew backwards uncontrollably. Only after flying back 1,000 feet did he come to a stop. His face was filled with shock as he looked towards Xiao Yan. No matter how he thought about it, he did not expect that Xiao Yan, whose strength was a little weaker than him, would actually possess such a powerful fighting strength when fighting with him. Xiao Yan's aura had directly suppressed him. The might of that palm was even greater than that of his. Was that kind of strength really something that a 3-star half-emperor could unleash? Moreover, the old man was still forcefully controlling that spiritual blade at this moment. The expression on the old man's face involuntarily became solemn the moment he thought of this. The strength of Xiao Yan's fighting strength was really extremely powerful. Your Excellency's actions are looking down on us old fellows. It was a long while later before the old man opened his mouth to speak again. However, this time around, it was unknown whether his tone had intentionally or unintentionally dragged the other experts into it. When he spoke, the expressions of the few half-emperors changed slightly. Their brows involuntarily frowned slightly. However, they did not say anything in the end. Their relationship could not be considered good or bad, nor could they be considered to be allies. After all, regardless of who it was, each of them had their own thoughts in their hearts. With regards to the old man's words, they naturally ignored it. To them, such an old-fashioned method was a little too laughable. However, Xiao Yan's actions had after all affected the various factions in the city to varying degrees. At this moment, one of the half-emperors finally took a step forward in the air. His face was indifferent as he looked at Xiao Yan and laughed. "Sir, you are able to cultivate such strength at such a young age. You are truly a great genius of our southwestern region. However, your actions today have caused a storm in the city. This old man hopes that you will hold back for now." The moment these words of the old man were uttered, it was clear that he wanted Xiao Yan to stop. However, the process of inscribing the qi method was only half done. Given Xiao Yan's perseverance, how could he give up at this moment? "I'm sorry. Once the matter at hand begins, it must be completed without stopping. Otherwise, it will be considered a failure. From the way I see it, even you do not have any extra flame essence chalcedony in your hands." When the old man heard this, his brows, which were filled with wrinkles, involuntarily knitted together. His heart was also slightly dissatisfied with Xiao Yan's words. Xiao Yan's words not only told him that he would not stop, but also secretly contained a trace of threat. This caused the old man to feel a little uncomfortable in his heart. Without waiting for the old man to speak, Xiao Yan's voice once again sounded out. This also caused the expressions of the half-emperors to change once again. The gazes with which they looked at Xiao Yan also became increasingly dissatisfied. "Since everyone wants me to stop, and I am indeed unable to do so at this moment, why don't everyone wait here for a moment? Once I settle the matter at hand, everyone can leave. In this way, the people in this city will be safe and sound. Of course, if anyone is dissatisfied and wishes to leave, you must constantly suppress your own faction and guard it. Otherwise, if someone accidentally releases a wave of people, I will not be able to explain myself." The half-emperors were truly influential figures in the southwestern region. However, at this moment, they really did not know what to do in front of this young man. None of the half-emperors were united in their actions. If anyone was injured by this brat, they might not be able to leave this savage ancient city. However, if they were to truly guard this place, the half-martial emperors and utmost exalted would truly lose all of their face. After hesitating for a moment, other than the second Bandi Zun who had spoken to Xiao Yan and left, no one else among this group of people took action. Naturally, none of these people dared to secretly harm the younger generation of the old man. After all, the old man was the third overlord of the savage ancient city, the ancestor of the Li clan, Li Gon. His strength had reached that of a 6-star half-emperor. They did not have the ability to secretly harm the younger generation of Li Gan. Xiao Yan completely ignored all of this. He was able to guess who the old man was with just a glance. Hence, he could not be said to be unconcerned about all of this. All he did was to focus all of his attention on the flame essence jade marrow in front of him. He did his best to carve the Qi method diagram, which was gradually becoming complete. At this moment, the people within the hidden cloud pavilion were naturally unscathed due to the barrier that the elite Do Di had set up. These people were different from those people in the outside world who usually hid themselves. Instead, all of them were absorbed into their eyes. It was likely that this city would once again be filled with people not long later. On the 6th floor of the pavilion, Luo Jin and Elder Xian were standing in front of a window. Luo Jin's face was filled with a cold smile as he looked at those half-emperors, who were usually high and mighty. His eyes were filled with disdain. Elder Xian looked at Xiao Yan and repeatedly clicked his tongue in amazement. This caused the smile on Luo Jin's face to become even brighter. Those who are interested can join the group. Group number 4766686761. Chapter 103. On the streets, Xiao Yan strolled amongst the crowd as he slowly walked towards the western side of the savage ancient city. With the protection of the few half-D experts, the speed at which Xiao Yan engraved the Qi method could be said to be many times faster than before. In merely a couple of hours, he had completely engraved the flame jade essence. Moreover, he had also completely merged it with his incarnation. The refinement of the first incarnation was finally complete. The strength of this incarnation did not let Xiao Yan down. After a night of refinement, this incarnation had actually forcefully triggered a lightning tribulation. Once the lightning tribulation was over, the condensation could be considered a success. Only then would the strength of the incarnation be truly consolidated. The strength of the avatar had already reached the Do Shang class after being baptized by the lightning tribulation. Although it was of little use to Xiao Yan, it could be considered extraordinary by being able to possess such a strength at the first stage of the trial. Of course, if it was not for Xiao Yan's incomparably powerful spiritual strength that allowed the incarnation to completely endure the lightning tribulation, it was likely that the strength of the incarnation would not have reached such a level. A moment later, Xiao Yan's figure finally paused in front of a somewhat dilapidated house. This was his destination today. The weapon refiner that Luo Jin had mentioned to him previously lived here. After making some inquiries, Xiao Yan came to understand that this weapon refiner was truly an extraordinary person. He was said to be a miraculous person because he was different from ordinary blacksmiths. There was no mistake in his work, and all the weapons he refined were peerless divine weapons that could cut through iron like mud and cut through hair with a single blow. What was different about him was that he had absolute confidence in himself. When he refined a weapon, he never looked at the other party's faction or background. He only looked at the materials used in the refinement. If someone wanted to get this weapon refiner to refine a weapon, the materials that person had brought along must be incorporated into the real mysterious heaven metal. In other words, if one wanted to get him to refine a weapon, the materials used must be extremely rare in this world. If there were more, he would definitely ignore them. Such an extraordinary person was truly one of a kind in the Yuanwu continent. With light footsteps, Xiao Yan slowly walked into the small courtyard. After entering, he discovered that there was not a single person to be seen in this huge courtyard. A trace of suspicion involuntarily rose in Xiao Yan's heart. Was this really the place where that armament master lived? Although he had some doubts in his heart, this was the place that he had received the news after all. If he did not go in and take a look, he would not be satisfied. After Xiao Yan took a few more steps forward, Xiao Yan's eyebrows twitched unconsciously, and a glint flashed across his eyes. Just a moment ago, he vaguely heard someone talking in the inner courtyard in front of him. In that case, this might really be the place where the weapon refiner lived. Xiao Yan shook his head and smiled. Why did these eccentric old fellows like to turn their residences into this? They were merely living in seclusion and were not beggars. Xiao Yan sighed in his heart. His feet moved a little faster. Within a couple of steps, he had stepped into the inner courtyard. However, when the scene in front of him entered his eyes, Xiao Yan's face involuntarily lifted into a mocking smile. When fate came, it was really impossible to stop it. At this moment, there were two familiar human figures standing in an orderly manner in front of Xiao Yan. These two people were the young master of the Li clan whom he had met at the Yunin Pavilion not long ago. The other person was the 8-star elite Do Shang who had been following beside him. Li Kong was also attracted by the sudden sound of footsteps and turned around. However, when he saw that the person who had arrived was actually Xiao Yan, who had caused him to be ridiculed by others, a fury immediately surged into Li Kang's heart. A cold snort was emitted from his nose. Both of his eyes glared angrily at Xiao Yan. Li Kang's footsteps suddenly strode toward Xiao Yan. He blocked Xiao Yan's body, which was about to continue moving forward. Li Kang looked at Xiao Yan with his nose pointed to the sky and coldly said, "Brat, do you still remember the words that this young master has said to you? If you leave the Yunin pavilion, it will be the day of your death. Yesterday, I gave you a day to live. However, you were unwilling to cherish it. Since this is the case, this young master will make you pay the price today." Before his voice sounded, the old man behind Li Kang had already unleashed his 8-star Do Shang aura, which appeared terrifying in the eyes of others. It charged toward Xiao Yan in a turbulent manner. Li Kang, who was standing in front of Xiao Yan, also waved his right hand. A slap was violently swung toward Xiao Yan's face. Looking at the ferocious smile on Li Kang's face and the might of this slap, if this slap were to land on Xiao Yan's face, it was likely that even Xiao Yan, who was a bandit, would be stunned by the slap. This was sufficient to show just how vicious Li Kang's character was. He was definitely the kind of vicious person who would take revenge for any grievances. He would definitely not tolerate any sand in his eyes. From Li Kang's point of view, even if Xiao Yan's strength had reached the Dosheng class, it would be difficult for him to move in the face of the frightening aura of the high-class Dosheng behind him. Looking at Xiao Yan's seemingly calm face, it was likely that he had been completely suppressed by that frightening pressure until he could not even move his flesh. This also gave the endless fury in Li Kang's heart a perfect opportunity. At the very least, this was what Li Kang thought in his heart. Today was the best opportunity for Li Kang to take revenge on Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan felt an increasing disdain in his heart as he looked at Li Kang's ferocious face. An 8-star Do Shang was merely an ant to him. At this moment, seeing that Li Kang did not know what was good for him and insisted on provoking the fury in Xiao Yan's heart, Xiao Yan really wanted to do something. However, Xiao Yan's eyes seemed to have thought of something after this thought flashed across his heart. Both of his eyes were filled with ridicule as he looked at Li Kang in front of him. The next moment, just as Li Kang's slap was about to land on Xiao Yan's face, a human figure suddenly appeared by the side of Li Kang's body. This human figure appeared illusionary. However, from the aura that was emitted from his body, one could confirm that the strength of this human figure had already reached the Do Shang class. The moment this figure appeared, Li Kang, who was at the side, instantly discovered it. However, when he saw the person's face clearly, the expression on his face changed drastically. This was because this fellow whose figure was somewhat illusionary actually looked exactly the same as Xiao Yan in front of him. The instant this avatar appeared, it also swung a palm violently towards Li Kang's face. At a glance, it appeared as though it wanted to exchange a slap with Li Kang. However, compared to Li Kang's slap, this palm of this avatar was many times stronger than Li Kang's palm regardless of whether it was in terms of speed or strength. One thing that was certain was that this slap that this avatar had unleashed at this moment would definitely land on Li Kang's face before his palm landed on Xiao Yan's face. In this first confrontation, Li Kang, the eldest young master of the Li family, was bound to lose. Pa! After a brief moment of horror on Li Kang's face, a thunder-like clear sound suddenly spread across the inner academy. Li Kang's body suddenly flew backwards under this attack. He was just like a kite with a broken string as he drew a parabola in the air. After which, he violently smashed into a wall. Even the wall was forcefully shattered. This was enough to tell just how great the strength of that slap was. The gap between a Ban Shang and a Do Shang was also obvious. No matter how one put it, a Ban Shang would forever be in existence like a child playing with mud in front of a true elite Do Shang. That 8-star Do Shang had already moved his body the moment Li Kang flew backwards. He gave chase. Unfortunately, he was still a little too late. All he could do was watch as Li Kang smashed into the wall. This old man was really furious when he saw this scene. His duty was to protect Li Kang. Yet, Li Kang had met with such a blow in front of him. Yet, he was completely unharmed. How could this not cause him to be furious? Ha! Bold young fellow. How dare you hurt my young master? You are really seeking death. An explosive roar was suddenly emitted from the old man's mouth. He did not care where he was as his body moved and appeared in front of the avatar. A fist was thrown forward and suddenly smashed towards the chest of the avatar. The overbearing Do Qi carried the true might of an elite Do Shang. The frightening wind from the fist tore through the empty space. The sharp wind actually caused the body of the avatar to fluctuate a little. The might of an 8-star Do Shang was really this powerful. The avatar was also shattered by this attack. Of course, Xiao Yan still maintained a calm and indifferent manner in the face of this. It was indeed a little difficult for his current avatar to fight against an 8-star Do Shang. However, an 8-star Do Shang might be able to break his avatar, but what could an 8-star Do Shang do in front of his actual body? At the instant when the incarnation exploded, a frightening soul power spread out and instantly enveloped that 8-star half-martial emperor. Then, like trash, that 8-star half-martial emperor was ruthlessly tossed away. When that 8-star half-martial emperor smashed into the ground, a deep crater several dozen feet deep was created. Xiao Yan was just about to act again when an old and somewhat hoarse voice was suddenly transmitted into the inner academy from nowhere. Brat. One should be lenient whenever possible. If you really wish to fight and kill, you should leave this place first. This place of the old me does not have a place where you can fight. Xiao Yan's expression suddenly changed the moment the voice was emitted. His pupils suddenly shrunk. Although this voice did not appear to be anything special, Xiao Yan could tell that the owner of this voice was definitely an extremely strong person with an unfathomable strength. At the very least, Xiao Yan did not have the ability to detect just how strong this person was. Those who are interested, please join the group. Group number 4766686761. Chapter 104. When the elderly voice entered Xiao Yan's ears, the frightening spiritual strength that surged out like a tidal wave also completely returned to Xiao Yan's body in a short instant. Immediately, Xiao Yan's expression returned to normal. He cupped his hands in front of him, bowed towards the inner academy and said, "Since Elder has instructed me to do so, and this is Elder's territory, I will naturally follow Elder's wishes." Since he was an intelligent person, Xiao Yan was naturally able to understand with one sentence. Since this was the Elder's territory, he was naturally the mysterious weapon refiner. In the face of such an elder, regardless of whether it was on the surface or in his heart, Xiao Yan naturally had to give him sufficient respect and reverence. Regardless of how strong this elder was, just his peerless weapon refiner technique was enough to cause Xiao Yan to respect him from the bottom of his heart. After all, his heavy Xian ruler still required the help of this elder in order to be truly restored to its original state. When Xiao Yan's words left his mouth, the elder snorted softly. Immediately, he curled his lips and said in a cold voice with some impatience, all right. Don't show off your glib tongue in front of this old man. It annoys me. If you have something to say, say it. If there is nothing, leave. Oh, that's right. Restore my walls and land. Otherwise, don't leave." When Xiao Yan heard this, his expression was slightly stunned. From the looks of it, this elder really opened his door to do business. The moment he opened his mouth, he was chasing people away. It was really unknown how many customers were scared away by him. In the face of the elder's cold words, Xiao Yan's face also appeared to be quite helpless. He smiled softly and opened his mouth again to speak. "Since this is the case, I have a request." "Since that's the case, Senior, I have indeed come here today to ask for a favor. I hope that Senior can lend me a hand." When Xiao Yan's words came out, deep within the inner academy, an elder wearing linen clothes with a face full of vicissitudes of life slowly opened his eyes at this moment and looked toward Xiao Yan's direction. This glance seemed ordinary, but for some unknown reason, when Xiao Yan saw this glance, he suddenly felt that he was actually unable to move an inch. At this moment, all of his secrets were incomparably clearly reflected in the elder's eyes. A moment later, the old man knit his brows slightly. The expression on his face was somewhat surprised. The gaze he used to look at Xiao Yan had an unusual glint flashing within it. With regards to Xiao Yan's arrival, the elder had already known about it. This was because as early as yesterday, the pavilion master of Yunyin Pavilion had come to look for him and explained that someone would come today to seek his help and bring him a big gift. For this elder, as a weapon refiner, to be able to see the world's unique weapon refining materials was already considered an extremely big gift. Therefore, this elder could be considered to be somewhat anticipating Xiao Yan's arrival. However, at this moment, under the elder's investigation of Xiao Yan, he did not detect the weapon refining materials that Xiao Yan should have on him. This caused him to be somewhat dissatisfied in his heart. The elder frowned slightly. It was a long while later before he withdrew his gaze from Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan also suddenly felt his body lighten. That inexplicable pressure had finally left. The elder's eyes turned, but he opened his mouth to ask Xiao Yan. "Brat, may I know why you are looking for this old man? My weapon has been severely damaged and is on the verge of shattering. Furthermore, I heard that elders' weapon refining skills are exquisite, so I specially came to this savage ancient city to seek elders' help." "Oh? There are many people who seek help from this old man. There are also countless people with extraordinary strength. If you want this old man to help you, you should first tell me your name." Xiao Yan could not help but frown when he heard this. What kind of rule was this to ask for help? This elder was really strange. Li Kong, who was at the side, could not help but frown when he heard this. He had come to find this elder no less than 10 times, but he had never heard of this elder having such a rule. What exactly was this old man selling in his gourd? The elder obviously did not have a good impression of this Li Kong. It seemed that this fellow often came here and disturbed this old man's peaceful days. At this moment, when the elder saw that Li Kong actually had some doubts about his words, he felt a trace of displeasure in his heart. He snorted lightly and said coldly to Li Kong, "Brat from the Li family, do you have any objections to this old man's words?" Li Kang's pupils suddenly shrank when he heard this, and his expression also changed. Only then did he respectfully reply to the old man, "This junior doesn't dare." "It's just that. I'm just puzzled. This junior has come to your place no less than 10 times, but I've never heard of anything that requires one to report their name first." However, before Li Kong could finish his words, the old man had already spoken in a cold voice once again. "What? This old man has a rule here. If I say there is one, then there is one. How can it be your turn to preach?" As soon as these cold words came out, Li Kong instantly felt an incomparably terrifying invisible aura enveloping him, making him unable to move at all. Li Kang's face instantly turned pale, but he also knew that this old man was not someone he could casually provoke. He immediately admitted his mistake and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. This junior doesn't dare. This junior is only curious, which is why I spoke in such a manner. I hope that elder can give my grandfather some face and let this junior off this time." Unfortunately, Li Kang's words had just sounded when the terrifying aura, which had suppressed him until he was unable to move, suddenly soared. It directly pressed him to the ground with a bang, causing the ground of this small courtyard to suddenly turn into a huge pit at this moment. Soon after, the old man's disdainful words were slowly emitted from his cold mouth. One could hear him say, "Your grandfather's face, humph. Who is your grandfather? Is he even worthy of calling himself face in front of the old me? Just how great can his face be? Humph." A disdainful cold snort was once again emitted after these words were spoken. Li Kong and the 8-star Do Shang's bodies were instantly sent flying like human cannonballs. They were forcefully thrown out of this courtyard, causing a large number of houses to turn into ruins in an instant. "Humph. You are merely a small bandee. You actually have the nerve to talk about face in front of the old me. Do you really think that the old me is one of those lousy weapon refiners from the secular world?" Only at this moment did Li Kong finally understand. Even his grandfather would have a respectful expression on his face when he talked to him about this elder. This kind of true expert was really not someone that they could easily form a relationship with. Even a bandee Zun was as weak as an ant in front of this old man. Yet, he actually dared to talk about face in front of him. He was really asking for a beating. The old man let out a cold snort and sent Li Kong flying. After which, he ignored Li Kong. Instead, he once again turned to look at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's heart was slightly shaken. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless as he hurriedly opened his mouth to speak to the old man. "Elder, this junior is called Yan Xiao." As his words rang out, a glint flashed across the old man's eyes. After which, he curled his lips and spoke with an impatient face. "Little brat Yan Xiao, I never look at the person when I do my work. I only look at the materials used to refine weapons. I think that you should know most of my rules in the outside world. In that case, I won't say anything more. Take out the items." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan's expression became joyful. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in his heart. With a flip of his palm, the heavy Xian ruler, which was on the verge of breaking, appeared in Xiao Yan's palm out of nowhere. The deep cracks on the ruler made it look as if it was about to break apart. In the middle of the cracks, there was an incomparably clear fist imprint. This caused Xiao Yan's expression to change once again. A monstrous fury also surged out from his heart. If the third hallmaster had not died, it was likely that Xiao Yan would have gone berserk at this moment. At this moment, the old man's eyes did not notice the change in Xiao Yan's expression at all. This was because he had long been attracted by the almost broken heavy ruler in Xiao Yan's hand. The space in front of Xiao Yan suddenly shook. An elderly figure also instantly appeared. All of his eyes also landed on the heavy Shen ruler in Xiao Yan's hand. At this moment, a storm was stirred up in the old man's heart. This is actually the legendary heavy Shen ruler that has already disappeared on the continent. After the shock in his heart, the old man's eyes suddenly widened again. He lifted his head and looked at Xiao Yan. His eyes were filled with shock. As such, the heavy Shen ruler had already disappeared from the Yuanwu continent. Since the young man in front of him was carrying the heavy Shen ruler, and no one knew the young man's identity, could it be that the young man in front of him was from another continent? At this thought, the old man's heart also suddenly shook violently. This was the first time he had seen a half-emperor expert from another continent at such a young age. Since ancient times, the experts from other continents who had come here were all old men and women. Now, he was actually able to see such a young person. How could he feel shocked? Little Luo, you actually did not inform me of such a big matter in advance. See if I don't find time to deal with you. After a long while, Xiao Yan finally regained his senses. However, when he saw the old man in front of him, his expression involuntarily changed slightly. Immediately after, he respectfully said, "Junior Yan Xiao greets elder." This time, the old man's attitude did a 180-degree turn for some reason. He looked at Xiao Yan with an amiable smile and laughed. "Not bad, kid. This thing is an entire piece of meteorite mysterious iron, right? Haha, it's really the only one in the world. I will definitely do my best to help you restore this ruler to its peak." Looking for recommendations. Looking for collection. Those who are interested, please join the group. Group number 4766686761.